tame me, war could not break me, to feel so alive, overflowing elation, ready for war, ready for war, ready for war, ready for war, hunting for food and pleasure.
Change inside of me. The inner human slowly dead in me. I feel it come alive. The darkness brings me light. There ain't no stopping it, and you will never have from me. Pain of the change. What have I become? A creature of the night, ruled by moonlight. The pain of the change. This body's no longer mine. Feel wild and free, but caged at the same time. It's hard to be human, think human, feel human. A hunger's arising inside of me. The beast is alive and break it free. It's hard to be human, think human, feel human. Keep putting more chains on the beast. Hope it don't break loose. You better hope so too. I'm still inside. I'm still here. What have I done? When did this all start? I have become a monster in the dark, a hunger like no other, running on instinct. What's this creature? Always inside of me. The pain of the change. What have I become? A creature of the night, ruled by moonlight. The pain of the change. This body's no longer mine. Feel wild and free, but
Oh. All right, folks. There's my shirt. You can see it. Backed up a little bit. People like to ask me about my shirts. This is a real photo. This is a real photo that was sent in by an actual witness. He took this in the Megamonitor forest. Yeah. That's where he was at. No. Okay. I got to make sure I put the disclaimer on there. No, I'm joking, folks. That is not because
That's clearly a Bigfoot selfie.
somebody's got to go.
Obviously.
He lied and said that he had a Bigfoot. That's how stupid this guy is. He's stupid. He's so stupid.
No, Bigfoot sent us that picture. You can see in the picture he's taking the picture himself.
See, now they're
It's
changing the
obvious.
story. Now they're saying Bigfoot took it. They're so damn stupid.
All you gotta do is look at the picture. Clearly, there's a Bigfoot taking a selfie.
If anybody believes or watches their show, they are stupid as hell. Mm-hmm. Tons and tons of emails here, folks. I'm trying to find a person's email. Long stories, man. This is a long story. Nothing wrong. Not complaining about that. It's just a very long story, and that's not it. I'm trying to address somebody. Okay, so I guess it's safe to give the person's name because it's just. I mean, it's not an encounter,
Mhm.
right? I don't know. Susie Lines says. She's like, okay, this is for you, Susie. She says, special message for Josh. Can you? This is because she wanted a giveaway, right? I don't want to give your name. I shouldn't have. But maybe I shouldn't have said your full name. I don't know. I try not to say people's names, but anyway, she says here, please share the. Just messed it up. Please share the protocol you used years ago. Can y'all hear me? Oh, I'm not even too far away. To help your Mastiff's hip issues. I would appreciate more than you would imagine. So hopefully she doesn't skip through this part. And she's obviously a member, or she wouldn't have won the giveaway. So Susie, what my Mastiff, when he got older, what I did was I gave him a regimen of glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM. And then later I added hyaluronic acid. Now, hyaluronic acid is something that I had to stop taking because it can actually raise your blood pressure a bit. But it didn't really raise mine that bad. But the wife was like, hey, I want you to be around, for a while because I need somebody to work and do stuff and pay bills.
Mm-hmm.
And so Anthony and Tony and my brother, everybody said the same thing. They're like, if you die, who's going to pay for stuff? So stop doing unhealthy stuff. So they've made it rules like they have pizza night where they can eat pizza, and I eat tofu and I watch them.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's fun. They'll
builds
put on
up your willpower.
Yeah, they'll put on the Little Mermaid and other Disney cartoons for me to watch at the kids' table. And I'm okay with that. They said, you had your fun for 30-something years, and now you have to be punished. And I said, okay, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have cheeseburger night where they're going around and trying different cheeseburgers. I have to eat the burger without the bun and without the cheese and without the meat. I just get lettuce, tomato, and onion.
That's a veggie burger.
Yeah, it's basically a veggie burger, and I get it. But I get to put vinegar and oil on it. Vinegar and olive oil. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we're not mean.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I love it. I love it so much.
I know.
It's awesome. So, yeah, I like this team, man. I like this team. They won, and everybody was like, oh, it's rigged because they were in Vegas in the first year they won. And I'm like, we know that. But it was really It's really cool though because I like their logo, and plus I like Las Vegas. I used to stay in Vegas for a little while, so I just kind of adopted it. And I'm like, hey, you know, I can root for Vegas teams. So once the Raiders were there, because the Raiders almost came to San Antonio, which would have been epic.
Yeah.
I would have instantly become a season ticket holder because the league hates the Cowboys, so they're never going to they really will never let them win. And then the sad, sick thing about it is Jerry Jones is committed to just making money and them not winning. He doesn't care.
No.
He's like, that's fine, Roger Goodell. We all just love our Cowboys, and we know you hate us, but as long as I'm making money, yeah, that's all he cares about. He doesn't care. You know, it's just ridiculous, man. So, yeah. So we got to jump right in, man. We don't have time to wait around for people to fill up into the chat, whatever. We're just they're gonna have to watch the replay because I only have a couple of hours and I got to bounce. I have things I got to do, and that is what's going on. So okay. So let me look up these people real quick. I was just busy today doing a bunch of stuff. We have 3 fire watches. We had 4 because what happens here in Texas is people's pipes burst because of the cold, and they don't really do anything about it. What I mean is, like, they're just like, oh, well, looks like that's going to explode. And then when it does, they have to order parts, and it takes a while. And then we end up having to sit there per the fire department because they have to shut off the water to the systems. And so we have to sit there and basically walk around and make sure that there's no, fire. Because, what happens, people go to sleep thinking everything's fine. They wake up and they're on fire.
It happens.
It simply happens.
You'd be surprised.
Just like you need a plumber and you end up calling an escort. A friend of mine did that. And he goes, hey, man, you got to help me. He's like, it was a simple accident, Wolf. It really was. And I know he's cheated on her before. And I'm just going to call him out by his name. His name is John. How appropriate. And her name is Dina, and so and I told him I was going to because she begged me to lampoon him for this. Okay, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, and he was like nervously like okay with it because he's wrong for what he did. So here's what he did. He said that this is a true story. So what ended up happening? He called a full escort service, right? Because it was in the whatever, in the directory, whatever it was. This was like 20 years ago. They're still together. They managed to make it work, and you know what? He's like, it was an honest mistake. I needed a plumber. And, we had a backed up toilet, and I ended up calling, and I said, hey, I need somebody to come over and check my plumbing. And a woman showed up. And he was like, oh, a female plumber. But in his defense, there were 2 other adults that were there when the woman showed up, right? So they kind of vouched for him not really understanding what she was doing there. And she's like, so where are we doing this? He goes, in the bathroom. So, because as fate would have it, his wife's, I guess it would technically be his sister-in-law too, but his wife's brother's sister, so that would be his sister-in-law too, right?
I think so.
So his sister-in-law was there, and then his cousin was there, and these are females, and one of them was babysitting, and the other one was there to help clean the house. And so Johnny decided that he thought it, and I've known Johnny since I was in high school. And Johnny, don't try to lie. This happened. So this is a funny story, just until we get some people in here. But what happened was he called, and there was a woman that showed up, and she looked like a woman of enterprise.
Lady of the night.
It was daytime. I'm gonna say a woman of enterprise. Let's be polite.
An entrepreneur.
Because those kind of workers are people too. Okay,
Yeah, they're entrepreneurs.
they're entrepreneurs.
If you're unemployed, just say you're an entrepreneur.
I used to work with this guy who, when we were doing security, he was weird, dude. He was so weird, and he hated women that did that. And I'm like, I think it's wrong, but I'm like, I don't hate it. Like, he would jump out and get in their face, scream and yell, and then a couple times he got overzealous.
Jack the
And-
Ripper.
Yeah, his name was Antonio, and he maced him. I'll just say his
Jeez.
name was Antonio D. And he was the one that you remember Thule
Mhm.
was talking about. He pooped in his car.
Yeah.
That was him.
Okay.
And so I worked with him a couple times out at this place called the Anderson Group Properties. It's on the east side. And it was a real bad place. But I wasn't getting death threats and having people threatening to do drive-bys on me. He was. So when I worked with this guy, the first night I was out there, he tried to pull this training day bullshit with me. And he goes, I confiscated this off of someone. And it was a crack pipe.
Mhm.
Now, I had worked at another complex. I worked a couple of them. So I knew what it was. I'm like, why are you carrying that? Why has that not been turned in? And he's like, we had the patrol car. We had these Crown Vics and everything. And we were all blacked out, in this July, and you're in this vest and they paid us pretty good, and a lot of those guys went on to become cops. I went the other direction. But then I changed my life, folks. Everybody knows the story, whatever. So I just looked at that and I was like, why did you not log that in? Why is that there? So he's like, do you want to hit it?
What?
Yeah. So I know I'm sidetracking from the story, but I'll get back to it. And I was just like, no, I don't. I've never worked with someone who did this before. And he's like, well, I was just testing you. And he puts it back in the glove compartment in a paper sack.
Thanks for the test, I
Yeah.
guess.
And so I'm sitting in a car with that in the glove compartment.
It's so hard to resist the
This was
crack
back
pipe.
in mid 90s, actually, probably. Yeah, it was a long time ago. So it was longer than 20 years ago. And I'm like, what are you planning on? What are your plans? And he was like, well, I just want to see if you were going to smoke it. I want to know what I'm dealing with. I was like, you've been working with me for a year. We only worked together a couple times, like at a concert and other stuff. And he was one of those that was going to go on to become a cop. That was his thing. And he said he was checking me to see if I was going to do something. And I'm like, one of my achievements in this life, if you want to call it an achievement, I can honestly say, I can completely, my hand to God, I can say that I'm not a crackhead. There's a lot of things I've failed at in life, but being a crackhead is not one of them. I have never smoked the baby rose.
You've never failed at being a crackhead?
Never failed and become a crackhead. Let's put that. I've never failed to turn down crack. Another thing I have not done is, even though lots of women have thrown themselves at me over the years and tried to bribe me and pay me, they've offered me cars and trips to, what's a good place?
Aruba.
The Bermuda Triangle. Different places they've offered to take me, really hot women too. I'm telling you. One of them, Shackley, she
almost had all of her teeth.
She did. She was pretty, she was hot. She was pretty good.
Yeah, the meth had her body temperature up pretty high.
So she wanted to take me to Jamaica. I'm just joking. I don't know, dude. Folks, ain't nobody trying to take me nowhere. They were just like, what are you doing? Why are you in my car? I'm like, I just was trying to steal it, and now you're in it. What are you doing? What are you doing? Jeez. Oh, man. It's like one of my black friends was joking around with me one day, and he was just like, you get nervous around black people? He asked me, and I was like, no. He's like, you act like a black guy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, you're just very comfortable around black people. I was like, I work around them. I deal with them. Because when I was younger, I had all kinds of, I had racial issues with white and Hispanic people because I was mixed, and it was always like, you're a half breed, this and that. But the black people were just like, come hang out.
Yeah.
They didn't care. And so I hung out with people I played ball with and I boxed with and whatever. And you know, they were on my wrestling team, football, whatever.
They probably could relate to not being accepted. So
He said, and so I was sitting around with some of my black friends one day. It was like 3 or 4 of them, right? We were all hanging out. I had 2 roommates that were black at that time, and we were hanging out. We were talking, and people get all uncomfortable about racial issues. I don't care. I don't care what you are, male, female, whatever. And they were just like telling me, they're like, well, what's a situation that you would be uncomfortable with? I said, well, there are a few, you know, and I was like, I've worked in government housing, you know, and if you're smoking crack in front of me and I come home and you're holding my TV, then obviously I'm going to have a problem, you know. It's like, but that would transcend any kind of race or boundary, whatever. And they were like, "Oh, you wrong for that," and they all started laughing, whatever. And I was like, "Well, it's the truth." And just going by experience, you know, I've seen it happen. But I actually had to make an arrest on a guy. He was Hispanic, and get this, he was holding a TV. This wasn't back in the day when you could hold them slim TVs.
yeah,
He was holding a TV, wearing a toboggan and his dog tags. He was in his underwear and socks.
for maximum aerodynamism.
And he had on gloves.
Okay.
But he was carrying a TV out of someone's house. And when I asked him if it was his TV, he was like, whatever. And there was this black lady across the street. She's like, he's stealing that motherfucker. You know? And I said, why is she saying that? He goes, I don't know. Mind your own business, Wella. Adventures in the Hood. I thought about writing a book about it and just calling it Adventures in the Hood. Oh, man. So, yeah, there was some really weird things. So my friends that were living with me at the time, my friend Greg and Jack, and they were like, they thought it was hilarious, the stories I would tell them. And so one night I decided to take them out there to where I worked because I was off that night. And these are 2 big brothers, man. Like Jack is 6'4", Greg is about 6'3", almost 6'4". Big dudes, man. They played college football. They were at that time, and they were big guys, and we were off at that time. I think Jack was at Saw Ross and Greg was at Blinn. And they were my roommates. And we were just, I was always gone. I didn't care. And so I said, you want to see where I work? I'll take you. And they were like, whoa. And we lived in South Austin. We weren't like no punks. Like we weren't, you know, but this was the hood. Now, back in the 90s, there was some bad hood in Austin. And we drove through there, and they were like rolling their windows up. I said, what are y'all doing? Where you with that? I was like, why are you rolling your window up? I said, you can't get a good feel for the locals if you don't roll your window down.
Cutting yourself off from the vibrance of the neighborhood.
And they were like, that woman is selling something. I said, yeah, she's selling herself. That's what that is.
It's part of the neighborhood charm.
And I said, and over there we have the local crack vendor. And they were like, damn, this is just going over here. I said, yeah, it's going over here. It's going down, bro.
A lot of commerce going on here.
I would say that Jack and Greg were like, Greg was probably middle class straight up, and Jack was probably a little bit less, lower middle class, because he lived in Dust Springs, which is a bad area. And but it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
Like I got into a fight with one of his friends in the front yard, you know, at Dove Springs. And there was probably like a dozen black people there. And I'm the only white. I look like a white guy, you know, look, I don't look black, you know. And so I get into a fight, and we just started throwing down, or squabbing, as we said back in the day. And it ended with me holding him in like a jiu-jitsu type move. And they just, you know, when you start rolling around, they just broke it up, and he was winded, and I didn't care to keep fighting. I was like, whatever, you want to stop? He was the aggressor. It was at a barbecue, and nobody jumped in. Whereas where I worked, if I would have just argued with someone until they got to know me, once they got to know me, they liked me. I was one of the likable guards. I actually did have people out there that were friendly to me and would defend me. Especially some of the, what they call big mamas out there. They were like, nah, don't be messing with him. He do his job, you know, whatever. And you would get ganged up on real quick if you were the security.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say about a half a dozen guards got their ass whooped out there. I was not one of them. But they did. They got their ass whooped because they go out there with an attitude. And some of it, I'm going to be honest, some of it was racial too. They went out there because they wanted to mess with those people.
Yeah.
So this guy, AD, he was that way. Years later, I ran into him at the gym. Look at my hair. Look at this. Like something about Mary hair over here. What's going on with this? So years later, I ran into him at the gym, and he tried to come up and talk to me and be all cool and stuff. And I was just kind of like, whatever. And he's like, oh, you still don't like me? I'm like, dude, the first time I really worked with you, you tried to offer me crack. And you wanted me to see if I would do it or something, whatever. So we get back to the station, it was our where we checked in the cars and stuff. And I said, you need to turn that in. It needs to go to the police. I'm like, I'm not going to drive around with you, because we were there to get gas. And then we went down the road to the what we call the clubhouse. I said, dude, turn that in. And he goes, oh, you want them goody two shoes? I'm like, I thought you were trying to see if I was corrupt. Now it was like, I'm telling you, it was like his little twisted version of Training Day or something. And it was all day with this guy. And he also did this little thing where he dropped me off to deal with these two guys that were local dealers, and then he drove away. Yeah. And so then I told my bosses, I said, look, I ain't dealing with this guy. I'm not dealing with this man. I don't know what this guy's deal is. And he did enough crap like that to where it culminated with our friend Mike Tooley taking a big poop in his Camaro. We were all in a big meeting. We had these Monday meetings. You know how we had those briefings we used to have to do all the time? And there was a Monday briefing, and it was going over all the F-ups from the weekend, because there were some high dollar accounts. We were doing all the housing authority. And so we were sitting in this meeting, and if you were what they call this blackout, some BS, whatever, we wore the black uniforms, and you basically looked like you were going to invade Poland. That's what you look. And so I'm like, what are we doing? I'm half asleep, and then I hear him come in screaming and yelling that there was a giant turd that somebody had pooped in his car, and everybody erupted laughing. 20 guys and just started laughing. 20 or 18 guys and two women, and everybody's laughing. We're like, dude. And I was probably, maybe there was only like a handful of us did not have any plans to go and try to become cops. And a couple of these guys, one of them went to become a cop in a neighboring town, and he is a dickhead. There's two of them. One of them pulled me over one day, and he acted like he didn't know me. All he wanted to do was talk about the taser that I had in the back seat. And I said, that's a taser. You want to play with it? I was like, you act like you don't know. I used to be your boss. What are you doing? You ain't my boss. I'm like, okay, whatever, dickhead. And he had this look on his face like he instantly became dumb. You're supposed to become a better person. Instead, you became stupid. So anyway, that's what happened. And so it was just a big mess. And so I showed my roommates at the time. I said, this is where I work. And they were like, damn, dog, I wouldn't work. I mean, it's what I do, man. I used to work every year during the, what do you call it? The Texas relays. I would get calls. Because there is it's 99% African-American down there. And everybody's like, oh, man, come on, work, whatever. And wherever I worked, typically, we didn't have a lot of problems. And I had a good crew. And on that crew, there was only two other guys that were not black. And a couple of my friends, my friend he's not around anymore, but they called him MC Overlord. He was a DJ and a rapper. And he came up to me one day and he says, how do you stand being around all these, people, that because they see it as like a color or whatever. And I'm like, do it all the time. People are people, unless, it becomes something more. And I honestly think that one of the things that has helped me over the years when it comes to the race and the gender and all the other things, the biases that people have, is because I saw something when I was 15 that looked like a freaking werewolf. So people look at these people and they're like, look at that person. That's a monster. I said, yeah, that's a monster. It's a human. They're a monster. They've done some bad things like serial killers and things like that. But I'm like, have you seen a werewolf? What? And I'm like, yeah, a werewolf. because that puts things in perspective. We got a call the other night about a guy that was being creepy and doing something, and it turned out he was just a guy from Jordan who was doing a fire watch at one of our properties that we do the patrol on. And I'll tell you what this has to do with what we're talking about. And the lady was like, I can't sleep. I'm so scared. He just looks so, menacing. He was a little old grandpa looking dude.
Yeah.
But I mean, to her, he was Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
And I don't know what her motivation is. I don't know if it was racially motivated, but he looked like maybe he was Hispanic or Arabic. I don't think that she is white. I think she's Hispanic too. But I think she was looking at him and just seeing somebody that could be a threat. And then we talked to the guy, and he's a little old man. I mean, and he was a nice guy. But to her, he was a menace, But to us, he's just a little old abuelo,
Yeah.
It's like he was a nice guy, and he actually gave me the contact of somebody that I could use as a worker. It seems like a pretty decent person, but shout out to him. And so I think it's all a matter of perspective. People think that somebody looks menacing, that they're monstrous. But you know what? The fact of the matter is, us here on this show, at least most of the people, unless you're new, we are well aware that there are real threats out there. There are not normal. There are monsters. And I'm going to say this right now, early in the show. I'm going to tell you, I believe that this is real. I believe that werewolves exist. I do. I think that this dude exists. Maybe not him, but, somebody that looks like him. And I think that Bigfoot, Dogman, it's all real. I say things on here too that can be hot button things and could get me in trouble and make people upset. And I don't give a crap. They mass report. That's the beauty of it, though. They mass report your channel constantly anyway. What does it matter? What does it matter? I'll be right back. Anthony, you can take over. You can entertain them for just a second.
Okay.
Quick restroom.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll just be hanging out. So I actually don't know any of the stories that we'll field today, because he was on the phone for like 3 hours today, while I was asleep, because I worked until like noon, and then I had to go home and get some rest. But he stayed up all day fielding stories. But all I know is that it's got something to do with werewolves and black-eyed kids. Now I don't know if they're two different encounters, or maybe it's one encounter, and both of these, like one encounter with both of these things. Stranger things have happened. Because tiny hands dance. I have the tiny hands right here, but it's not time for the tiny hands dance. I mean, it's almost never a time for the tiny hands dance. Just every now and then. Every now and then I will grace you with the tiny hand dance.
All right.
You plan to slap anyone tonight with the mini hand? No. Slapping with this is not very painful. It kind of defeats the purpose.
Here we go. All right. Sorry, folks. I had to answer nature's call real quick. I was holding it. And Dorothy, you're on there working for us. You'll be relieved shortly. I had to send somebody on an errand, and then they'll be there to relieve you. So here's what happened. Do you guys remember? Let me make sure I get the name here. The first name, Albert. His name is Albert, but I'm going to make sure I get the other names correct on here. So I'm going to pull up my notes. And I did go at the 11th hour. I got to talk to the person, the second person. I had talked to the first person, and I say 11th hour, but at the last minute. So it was like 3 p.m. or something like that. And so I did some of the talking this morning. Thank goodness I caught her awake. eyes are burning a little bit. See if I can find your. There it is. Okay, so here's what happened, folks. This is interesting. Okay, this is in South Texas. I don't want to give exact locations or anything either, but let's just suffice it to say it's south of Corpus. It's down that way.
Mm-hmm.
And these people, they don't own this land. They were working on it. One of them owned it at that time, and they sold it, I should say. And now one of them still works down there, but not at that particular location. Thank you, Slim Jim. Thank you. We appreciate that, man. And so we do appreciate the donations, folks. Somebody had said something about, do you not want us to donate, to use the PayPal or whatever? I said, you can use the PayPal. You can put the link up to it if you want. But donations are greatly appreciated, but not expected. And so there was a guy named Albert. Do y'all remember that story? I don't know if y'all remember Albert. He's the last person that had that name and he had there was a Lechusa encounter attached to him. And then his daughter, I believe, if I'm telling it correctly, it's been a little while, a couple months maybe. I don't know, but so Albert has a friend who got in touch with me, and he told me, well, he got me in touch with this guy, and he had a Bigfoot encounter, which was pretty interesting. What happened to him? But it's not a real long one. It's not a real drawn out thing or whatever. But down in South Texas, in that South Texas corridor, there's a lot of squatching going on, and then there is Dogman. And so, yeah, you said lice stream, Jake. I don't know if that's what you were intending on. I don't think I have any viejos, as we call them in Spanish. But thank you. And so Albert got in touch. He said, get in touch with this guy. He's got a Bigfoot story. And so when the guy gives me the story, he goes, I know it's not, real long story. And he's a pretty nice guy, the one that I talked to. And he says, but I know somebody. Okay. He goes, that had an amazing encounter. His name is Riley. He's like, you need to talk to Riley. And he goes, so I end up, he gives me this number to this guy that's not Riley. It's a guy named Josh. And so I called Josh and I said, hey, I'm looking for Riley. He used to be your roommate. I'm trying to track this guy down. And so I end up getting another story from Josh. So then I end up getting one from Caleb, who was the friend of Albert, and then one from Josh. And then Josh says, my story it's just kind of, it's just there. But he goes, you need to talk to Riley. He goes, and I'll hook you up with him. So I tracked this guy, Riley, down. And this is what happened. It happened to him, his friend Adam, and another guy named Hector. And today I was able to talk to Hector. And then I talked to another person. Oh, God, I'm trying to think of the alias we decided to come up with for her. I can't remember. We'll call her Pam. I don't remember. We had an alias. She goes, just call me this. She's like, some people know me as that, and some people. And so I'm sorry, but it starts with the P. I can't remember what it was. But anyways, so she gave me a story, and it was pretty incredible. She is the daughter of the ranch owner. Okay. And she's also a female foreman, which isn't real common, but she owns a lot of horses and some cattle down there. Her grandfather and her dad do. And this happened about 12 years ago. This was in 2013, and it was in May. So 2013, it's coming up pretty soon here. I know, because in May is my anniversary with my wife. So 2013 is, and I think that what happened to these people, I think that it has, and I know it did, because when you talk to them, the long typed out whatever that Hector gave me didn't do it justice. Once I spoke to him on the phone, it was a whole different ballgame. That's why it's so good if you can talk to them, because you can get the story and you can tell it from an email or a text or a messenger message. But when you talk to these individuals, it changes the whole complexion of it. I really think that this was something like, this is one of those stories where it doesn't happen all the time.
Mhm.
And thank God it doesn't. Because here's what happened. Riley and Adam were out with their friend Hector, and they all worked it. Well, Hector and Riley worked there. Adam did not, but Adam would go there regularly, and it's a large property. It's 300 acres. It's just huge ranch land, right? At that time, it was 300 acres. It's part of it's been sold, and one of them, Riley, still works for the new owner on a different adjacent property, not where this one happened. But they would take four wheelers and they would go out and they'd shoot guns. It was a heaven for these guys. These young guys enjoyed. They loved living out there, and they had 3 tanks that were stocked with fish. And so it was just like, it was kind of like our place, but like way bigger.
Yeah.
And so they just had a wonderful life out there on the ranch, and they just loved being out there. And nothing weird happened until the early spring of 2013 is when it started, and it was in March, and we're coming up on March, the Ides of March. That was the first time they used to hang out in this area called the bunkhouse, and they used to have a lot more people that would work there. We would call them vaqueros, like Mexican cowboys, and they would stay in the bunkhouses. There were 3 of them spread out across this land, because at one time there were 1,200 acres, and then it got partitioned into four parts of 300 acres each. So the 300 acres is where they were at, and there was one of the bunkhouses that was there, and so they would have like these little parties, where other young people would come out there. They'd build a bonfire and they'd party and hang out in the bunkhouse. Nobody really stayed there anymore, and it was really it had become a rundown building with a metal tin roof, and it was just a kind of a rundown place. And one of the things that they talked about having seen there on a couple of different occasions from the different workers that worked there, and some of these guys would come up from Mexico and they would do cowboy and then they go back down. And these guys were from the Yucatan area, like down in the Mayan area, and they had seen some things. And one of them told them, they said that there was this, what they called a hairy man that would come around the bunkhouse and bang on the walls at night and scream and hoop and howl, and then it would run off. And that sometimes they would just go out, shoot the 30-30 in the air, and it would scare it off. And it was very ape-like looking. And that was the extent of what this creature would do. But the vaqueros had told his father, Riley's, or the girl, we'll call her Pam's father, some scary stories about another thing that lived on the property that she had never seen any evidence of in all the years. She was 32 or 33 years old when this happened, right? So she's like 46 years old now. She said, in all the years I'd lived out there, I had never seen any evidence of this thing that they had talked about. She's like, what they described was a large black bipedal wolf-like creature. And that sometimes the hairy men, or whatever they would call them, these things would take cattle, and then sometimes it was the work of this black wolf. So she was very skeptical of this. She had never seen anything. Now she did come across some weird footprints. Get this. The footprints were 4-toed. So there were 4 toes, 3 and then 1 big toe on these, and the big toe kind of stuck out off to the side. It was a very ape-like creature that she was witnessing. So she never, but that was the extent of it. But she had heard about this hairy man many times. It was about 6.5 feet tall, and it was skinny, it had a pot belly, and it would move around on all fours, but then it would run. But the weird thing about it is in the face, it looked almost human with a protruding forehead and a big jaw. And she said that's what they described. That's what Riley had claimed that they saw. Now, Adam was out there with another guy, I don't know his name, and they saw this Bigfoot type creature. Now, their description of it was not a 6.5 foot tall. They said this thing was 7, 8 foot tall, and it was monstrous. And it had big, protruding lower jaw, but like with teeth that came up. And they said it almost looked like one of these orcs from some video game that they were. I can't remember what they were talking about, but there was so much information trying to be relayed to me, and I was trying to get it all together. This was one night when they were out there and they were hunting. Now they were doing something that I don't agree with. It's called spotlighting, but these were young guys. They don't do it anymore because they kind of learned their lesson when they ran into this thing, and it tossed a log at their truck. Whew. So Adam told these guys, he said, look, hold on one second. I got to take a drink here. Sorry, folks. Every time I start telling the stories, something happens. So Adam was apprehensive, to say the least, but his friends kind of made fun of him because nobody had seen anything like this in a long time. In fact, the last sighting so far, what Pam did a lot of field work on this. She said the last sight, her and Riley, they see each other.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I'm a cradle robber. I'm 10 years older than him. I'm like, that's not a cradle robber.
Yeah.
I've heard of some weirdness, the guy that owns the Raiders. She's 22. I'm 70. She likes my smile. Sure, man. It's not because you own the Raiders.
Yeah.
You have a beautiful smile. You look like a Chucky doll, but hey, whatever.
She likes my personality.
My mother says I'm handsome. Yes. Okay.
The whippersnappers can see the inner beauty.
Your mummy. She says you look just like mummy. You're a mummy. Yeah, just whatever. No, that's cradle robbing. So he's, of course now he's, 36 years old. When this happened, he was a young guy. He was 23. And it was shortly after this incident that they really started to get, whatever. And talking to Riley, he's a very well put together guy. I can see how he would be somebody that, and so, yeah, it makes sense because she's a very go-getter type person. And so is he, which is another thing that lends credence to what they're saying. I believe what these people told me. I 100% believe this. It really happened to them. They had talked their friend Adam into going out there, and they they didn't really talk. They tricked him. They got him in the truck, and then they drove out into the middle of nowhere. And they said, hey, we're going to go do some hunting. And he was like, I don't want to go hunting. I don't want to be out here. After what he saw, he's like, I don't want to be out here. I saw Bigfoot out here. He goes, they're out here. They're huge. They're not no little pot-bellied little monkey thing y'all are talking. I don't know what these people are talking about. I said, I said, what if it's the same one? What if it grew? He said, I don't know, man. He goes, I just know that I didn't want to be out there. I wasn't into it. It wasn't for me. Now, when I talked to his buddy, that's when I talked to him. Him and his buddy kind of interviewed at the same time. I talked to Riley separately, and then him and Hector and Adam, I talked at the same time. And they're actually cousins. Their moms are first cousins. So I guess that would make them third cousins. But what happened to this guy, I think would make anybody balk at wanting to go run around in the woods when you have a log thrown at you And it didn't just get thrown at him, it hit his truck, the front end of it, and did damage, and he got away from it. So he didn't go out there much. They all had big parties and stuff. He would go out there tentatively after a couple years of staying away, because his happened in 2011. He's like, I had finally started to go back out there and party and hang out. He goes, but I was very apprehensive. He goes, I wouldn't even leave the bunkhouse when we were hanging out partying to urinate unless I had people with me. It scared him that bad. It would scare me too. But I'm not a wussy like you. I actually would go pee in Dogman and Bigfoot territory. I'm not like you, man. Sorry, Adam. I mean, I'm just saying. I don't know. Because I've done it. I really did. I did do it.
This is America.
This is America.
Man pees where he pleases.
Yeah.
It's not communist Russia.
If you get torn up by a Bigfoot or a Dogman, that's just the price you pay for being a man.
It's the price of freedom.
Freedom costs $1.05. Freedom isn't free. There's a hefty effing fee. Right? Freedom costs $1.05. So he's out there and he's telling him, he says, this is what he said. And this is what Riley kind of made a joke about it. He says, dude, he's like, you made something happen by saying this. Now, Riley's like me. He's got a Hispanic mom and a white dad. So I can really, and he said, my mother was a very superstitious woman. She was one of those people. Oh, thank you, honey. Appreciate it. He's like, my mother was a very superstitious woman. She was one of those people who believed that if you talked about Lechusa, well, guess what? In a few hours, it's going to come and snatch you up. And he was like, I never bought into this. He goes, now my brother, close that door. He says, now my brother, he goes, I can say 100% for sure. He goes, he believed everything my mother said. He's like, not me. No. He's like, there were 4 of us. Me and my one sister, not believing it. He goes, I wasn't wild, because I said, you sound like you're pretty wild. He goes, no, I wasn't wild. She was wild. The other sister, she was the baby. She believed everything. And my other brother, he goes, he was a sissy. He goes, he was a sissy. He was a mama's boy. He's like, I was like always out with my dad, hunting, fishing, whatever. And he goes, and my brother was like, I don't want to go out there. But when his brother was 7 years old, going on 8, because he couldn't remember if it was 7 or 8. He said his brother was 7 years old because it was 2nd grade, right? That's 7, right? He said, my brother was like in 2nd grade. He goes, I remember. He goes, I was in 5th. He's like, and I remember coming home and the police were there and all this other stuff because somebody tried to grab my brother and take him. He's like, but he's like, the description that he was giving the sheriffs was of a bear-like creature. And I thought that was very interesting. He said, he goes, as long as we were, the rest of his life, he talked about this bear man. And I told him, I said, let me tell you something. People see that like they see Sasquatch and like what you saw. So a giant bear-like being tried to take his brother when he was playing outside. The neighbor girl that was there playing with him was a year older, was pushing him in a swing. She bolted. And all she said was, it was what turned out to her, it was a man in a big fur coat. Because I think, and Riley thinks this too, that they had convinced her to believe that it was a man in a fur coat so that she could rationalize it. Because at first she was saying that it was a bare-headed man. So it ended up, hold on one second, folks. Sorry about that, folks. So anyways, there was this whole, and they didn't find a guy. There was nothing, whatever. And so I told him, I said, you have no idea how much that resonates with me, how common that actually is. Because these are people, folks, who work and live down in a ranch in South Texas. They don't know. They don't keep up with missing 411. When I asked each one of these people, they had no clue what that was. And in fact, they didn't know what the hell a Dogman was. Not one of them was calling this a Dogman. What happened to them and what they saw. There wasn't a Dogman. I'll tell you why. Because they were just recommended by another person, and I had to go through the channels and get to this story. Right? So Caleb was the one that got me in touch with Josh. And that was Albert. Albert got me in touch with, he said, you get in touch with Josh because he can get in touch with Riley. But I had to go through this other guy, Caleb, and each person gave me a story because they live in that corridor down there. South Texas, I saw Abe in the chat earlier. Hey, Abe. Abe sees from Spiritual Encrypted Encounters, folks. Does a really good job. You should check his show. I like him a lot. Good friend, loyal. He's talked extensively about how creepy and weird South Texas is because he grew up down there. A place that's steeped in mysticism and legend and brujeria, which is like black magic. Sometimes they say it's white magic, but magic is magic, right? Depends on how angry you are. And let me tell you something. These people went through something traumatic. When I talked to Riley about this, one of the things that he said, he goes, I can't sit up here hold on one second, folks. Trying to get comfortable. Oh, pop my back. Oh, thank goodness. I don't want to be leaning in and stretching and, whatever. It would have looked really.
Use that wheel that I got at the house for your back.
Yeah, because my back, I was trying to.
I use that thing all the time.
Pop, and it finally popped in a couple places. I got back in the gym last night for the first time over a month. So that's, thank you, Abe, for that donation. You don't got to do that. You need to set your channel up to get donations, man. You deserve it. And so what happened with this guy, Riley, me and him hit it off. He's like me, Hispanic and white, and we talked extensively. I really enjoyed talking to him. And I enjoyed talking to Pam. She was a really cool person, too. They're married now. And they have 2 kids. So congratulations to them. It worked out. But can you imagine that? Like, and one of the first things that happens is that. It's weird.
Hell of a first date.
Well, it wasn't a date, but she didn't know him that well, She saw this creature the night before they went out there. And like there was nothing romantic going on between her and Riley at that time. And Pam said, she's like, I was driving with my dad coming back from the hospital because he had been at the hospital. He had been in and out of the hospital. He's since passed away. But he was not doing well. And they were trying to figure out what was going on with him. It turned out he had cancer, kidney cancer. And they were driving. And she says, he was in and out of consciousness. She goes, and I see this thing run across the road on all fours, but then not really because the front limbs were not touching the ground. And it kind of skittered across. And then when it got close to the edge of the road, it was chasing something because she saw something dart across the road in front of it, small. Like a rabbit. And she said this thing sat up and was like fully erect. She's like, it had to have been 7.5 feet tall and massive. She's like this big head with these big, tall ears. She said it turned and it looked at me and my dad, and we were going around the bend to the entrance of the ranch. And she was like, Dad, did you see that? And of course, he's like sleeping. He's not doing good. And he was like, well, what was it? And when she started to describe it to him, and all the years that she had been out there, she had heard these stories, but not from him. So he had an encounter with one of these things when he was a kid, him and his brother. And his brother was older, and he passed away in an accident. He was in a motorcycle accident up near Dallas. So him and his brother had this thing happen. So they had something in common with Riley's brother, right? The thing that Riley's brother saw, though, really intrigued me. And And he gave me his brother's information. I reached out to him. I couldn't get a response. I still have not been able to get a response because I would love to pick his brain about what he saw. I think that would be extremely. Thank you for posting that, Lola. And about the Patreon. Join the Patreon, folks. We have a Patreon show tomorrow. And we've made the decision that on the Patreon show, we're just going to talk about whatever happens. If we end up talking about stuff, we talk about stuff. Last 2 weeks ago, Slim Jimmy came on, told his story. People can come on and tell their stories. And if you're a Patreon member, show up. It's a good reason to join the Patreon because you're going to get an extra show every 2 weeks. All right. So back to what we were saying. So, and there is the Patreon. So you can join it. Oh, yes, right there. So this guy tells me, he says, we are out there with Adam and Hector. Hector and me are working there on the ranch. He's like, and we were dealing with a lot of cattle. There was a lot of cattle that were coming in that weekend. So there wasn't a lot going on at that time. It was just because a bunch of cows had been sold. He goes, so it was kind of like we were running on a skeleton crew. And he goes, the cool thing was, he's like, I loved Pam's dad a lot. He was really cool. He was like a mentor to me. He goes, my dad passed away when I was, a few years before I'd started working there. He died when he was like 19, which is horrible. And his dad was very close. Dad had a heart attack. And he said, so he goes, her dad was like a mentor. He taught me a lot. He kind of picked up where my dad left off. He goes, and then a few years later, he passes away. So it was really hard. He's like, and I just try to be the best dad to my kids, good. He's a good guy. He seems like a really good guy. They go to church. They drive like 22 miles to go to church.
Dang.
And they don't miss a service because we go every Sunday. He's like, but he goes, we now are on this land where this happened. We're right adjacent to where this happened because some of it was sold. He's like, but it still haunts me every day. And he said, we're driving around and we're going out to this one particular watering hole where we always saw wild turkeys and deer. And we started to have an invasive hog problem. He goes, so that night we were looking for hogs. And if we come across coyotes, now I understand if you're a rancher or if you own animals at all, you don't like coyotes. I don't like them. I have a zero policy with coyotes coming up to because I have animals. And I don't like coyotes. Sorry, I don't. So with coyotes and with hogs, no bueno. Don't want them around. People that live in the city, which I also live in the city, but I'm also I have a ranch. You want to understand, but I do. And I understand completely. I am not a fan. I do not take pleasure in taking the life of animals. It's not something. But these animals will they're very destructive, folks. They're very destructive. And here in Texas, they are a nightmare. So just kind of to let you know, that's what we have to do sometimes is deal with them. So I understand. He says, so we were out there, we were going to clear, there was a herd of pigs had been coming through there and a pack of coyotes on the other end. And he goes, we were going to take care of it. And Adam's like, I don't want to be here. He goes, we had him a rifle. And then he's like, okay, whatever. And then everybody's happy, right? And they had a fourth friend too, who does not like to talk about this. He refused to comment about it. And he actually works for a church now. And he believes that this incident was demonic. He also believes that it happened to them because of their sins. Now, I don't know. I didn't make fun of the guy. They didn't make fun of him. They just said that's what he believes. So I'm going to let him believe what he wants. Right? That's his prerogative. I know some pretty righteous people who have had encounters with these things, so I don't know. But then again, you don't know what larceny lurks in the hearts of man.
Yeah.
You don't. When talking to this guy, it reminds me of what could have been with my encounter, how it could have gone further south and gone way worse. Because some of the people around my hometown who encountered this creature in that 4 to 5 month span, it didn't go as well as mine did. I say mine went well, even though it traumatized me for years. Me and Mr. Robles, that happened to. I will tell you that when and Anthony, you know this too. When we've talked to different people who've had encounters, dude, some of their encounters are absolutely horrifying,
Mm-hmm.
and this is one of them. They're driving, they're pulling up to this tank, a tank like a. We say tanks in Texas, right? It's a country thing.
Yeah.
Country folks say there's a tank out there with a bunch of, I stocked it with bass, and
It's a man-made pond.
yeah, it's basically catfish out there, So they had a catfish tank out there, and they just went out there and they were sitting, waiting to see if some hogs would come. The entire area just got really quiet. It was late March. And he's like, there was no sound. He goes, and it wasn't cold and it wasn't hot. It was just kind of, it was like a nice spring night. He's like, I think it was like mid 70s, It was nice weather. He's like, we're sitting there. And he says, there's nothing. There's not a breeze. There's not a sound. He goes, we get out of the truck and I'm like, do y'all hear that? And they're like, hear what? He goes, that. There's nothing. He's like, we heard nothing. And everybody got spooked. And our one friend, I'm not going to say his name, but we'll call him Jay. Jay got really nervous and he goes, I'm getting back in the truck. There's something wrong. We need to go. Now, they could have taken a lesson from him because that guy is very spiritually in tune. They all agreed on that he'd been, since they were young, one of them's sister, when she had her first child, he predicted the day it would be born, that it would be born late. Get this, right? This is weird. And he also predicted that it would be a girl. Then, when his own sister got pregnant, he predicted that there would be twins, and it was right toward the beginning of the pregnancy, and they didn't know this, and that they would be a boy and a girl. This guy had a very strong intuitive power. So maybe he's right. Maybe it was demonic. I don't know. So what happened? He says, I'm getting back in the truck. He's like, and then we hear this noise from the tree line that sounded like a roar, like a roar. I actually been practicing that. I hope if I do it really quiet, I can make it sound like. But if you do it without the, suppression, it just sounds like. Sorry, sound like Schmitty Jaegerman Jensen out there. So digging deep with these people and just getting all this information, I was on the phone with these people for 4 to 6 hours over the last week. And then today was 2 hours of just talking to these. Actually, that was just one person. It was 3 to 4 hours with 2 other people. So you're looking at 12 hours worth of information. And I got a lot of information. I got a lot of stories and a lot of leads from these people. This to me is how you're supposed to do it. We now have to follow up with somebody who works at HEB, who works at Dutch Brothers. We got to talk to somebody who works at Target. Folks, I'm telling you, everywhere we go, we get stories. Everywhere we go.
Bill Miller.
We were talking to the girl today. But did she give us a story, or did she say she had one? It was a mermaid thing?
Oh, no, that's right. Yeah, she just said that she believed that they're real.
She believed that there were mermaids. She started telling us about it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll see what happens, because a lot of times that's how it starts.
Yeah.
And then they'll get to know you and know you're not just going to make fun of them, or because there's people now that have channels where they'll take people and they'll say stuff and they'll just mock them. Have you seen this? This is crazy. You know, so you got to be careful, folks, on who you talk to and who you deal with. These new people just come out of nowhere. Hey, come on, talk to me. Yeah, whatever. And then I see some people that are on there like, yeah, man, congratulations to me. I've been around for this long, blah, blah, blah. These are the same people that refuse to deal with me because, you know, oh, no.
Big fat poo-poo cock ahead.
Yeah, he's a bad guy because somebody said so. We're not going to have him on our show, but we want him to support us, and they have no problem asking for money. Screw off. Okay? Don't talk to me. And not that I would want to go on their channels anyway. I mean, they're not like they're doing anything great, but they're really not. But just the fact that they won't deal with me, keep me at arm's length, because, hey, somebody way down the line may not like you. Who cares? Who cares? You'll see. Because I won't support you. I will never mention you ever. Okay. So yeah, congratulations on being invisible. Great, good for you. I know who's backed us up and who hasn't. I know where my bread is buttered. Believe me. And those are the people who will get the support. And you got these people that just got their hand out all the time. Oh, Rye Voss just had his 1 year anniversary. Good for him. So here's the thing. There's people out there who don't care. They don't give a crap. They just look at it as like, you know, they just look at it as like, you know, you're just there to make fun of or whatever. So I understand. And BJ, I wasn't trying to be rude to you. I don't care. It's just one of those things. It's like, we do what we do. Those people do what they do. But you got these new people who come out of nowhere, and they just want to mess with you. They don't care about what really happened to you. They'll have you go to a group and they'll all jump on you. I've seen it happen. It's a very nasty, cutthroat business, these people, and they make it a business. They're just looking for views and clicks, and they want money. That's what they want. That's it. So we have this situation where this person has to get to know you, and then they'll give you the information, and then you can relay it or whatever, or they can come on and they'll tell it, because they don't know who to trust these days. You don't know who the hell you're talking to. You don't know who you're dealing with. And also, I think there are people who are shills, and there's quite a few of them. And so here's the thing. We here at PRT, I'm going to tell you this, we'll continue to get attacked until the end of time, because these people aren't going to like the way I'm going to deal with them. I don't treat people like one person better than the other. I treat people accordingly. How you come and treat me and what you say and do about me and my family is how I'm going to treat you. So that's how it goes. Because there is information that eventually is going to come out, and it's going to be big. And it's not like these people that say, oh, there's going to be some big reveal about Josh Turner. Everybody already knows everything about me, dude. Yeah. Let's get to know you. That's what's going to happen with a lot of these people. They're going to be gone. Trust me. They'll be gone. They're liars. They're frauds. And they don't care. And so that's what's going on with this community. And so there are people now who are apprehensive. They'll get to know you. You hand them a business card, say, hey, talk to me. They'll come and watch your show and check you out before they give you anything. And that's smart, because they don't know you. And they don't know what you're about. You could be a prank channel for all they know. Or they make fun of people. Or you'll be talking and they'll be broadcasting it and making fun of you. So just be careful. There's a lot of weird stuff going on out there in YouTube land and in other facets of this community, podcasting, whatever. There's a lot of people out there that I just had a belly full, sick of their bull crap, dude. I don't really care. They won't lift a finger. They wouldn't pee on your gums if your teeth were on fire. But then they want something from you all the time, and then they don't do anything for you or your people. because that's what's important, is what they do for your people, which is nothing. Absolutely nothing. They're just takers. And enough is enough. So what this person said was, he said, we got back in the truck because our friend was getting spooked, and it was nerve-wracking, to say the least, because this guy had a history of, when we were kids, he had dreams that came true. There was another incident where, when they were having a sleepover, and the guy's dad, one of them's dad, was working in the oil fields, and he says, your dad got hurt at work. They woke up in the morning, like 6, 7 in the morning on a Saturday. And this kid tells him, your dad got hurt at work. And this other kid was like, what? And sure enough, his dad had been rushed to the hospital, and they eventually, messaged and said, hey, your dad is in the hospital. Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
He got hit in the head with a pipe. He lived, of course, but he ended up with minor brain damage.
Oh. Poor guy.
So Zoe says, emailed you 3 times. Well, send it again, because I'm very backed up. I have a lot of stuff, and let me know. Just put on there, hey, I'm Zoe Caddy from the show, and so I can prioritize it. Okay. And I'll take a look at it. I promise. And we need to get a separate email for the giveaways, because it's cluttering up our deal. I don't know why it's not. So that's the deal. He said, we got back in the vehicle after we heard this howling, growl, whatever. He goes, and then we see this thing come out from across the pond. And he said there were actually 2 ponds there together. One was to the right, and it was about 50, 60 yards. And then kind of up a hill, a little embankment. He said, and there was this tree line, and this creature comes out. He said it was hunched over. It looked almost like it was hunchback, but it was swaying side to side. He's like, and then it got down on all 4s, and it kind of was ape-like the way it moved. He's like, and then he's like, it's on the left side of this pond, and we're parked a little further, not quite in the middle. And he said that this thing came from to his left and started coming across. And it was running around the pond to go toward them. And they were like, it was still a pretty good distance away, over 100 yards. And they were like, is that thing coming towards us? And they were like, emphatically, his companions were like, yes, it is.
Time to go.
They're already in the truck. And he's like, oh, okay. So then his lights are on it. And then one of them said something that may or may not be true. But I would say this. I would say, yeah, Hector made a good point. He said, if maybe the lights are bothering it, maybe it doesn't like the headlights because we're spotlighting it. And he asked me about that. And I said, you're right. You're right. But think about this, folks. This is food for thought. What do? Do you take the headlights off of this monster? Because that's what it is. And let it run towards you in the dark? Or, I mean, do you in hope that it just maybe stops? Maybe it doesn't do that because it's just aggravated that you're putting a light on it. Or do you keep the light on it as it runs towards you? Well, here's what they did. They backed up and they kept the light on it. And it closed the distance. He goes, it was so fast. He called me Josh. He's like, Josh, it was so fast. He's like, it was on us real quick. And he goes, and it was only about 20 yards from us at this point. He goes, and we were going backwards in the truck. He goes, and it was getting closer and closer. And he goes, and I was just driving backwards. Luckily, there was nothing but pasture behind us. He's like, and when we saw this thing, here's what was going on. Its face right here where the muzzle was. He goes, it was a wolf-headed creature. It was gray. Same looking creature, the description that was given by Pam the night before. He had not talked to Pam. He did not know that she had seen this thing around there, stalking around that area. He said where the muzzle was, it was elongated. It was wolf-like, not bear-like. He goes, I emphasize, he goes, it was not like a bear. It was like a wolf. He said, and it was blood coming out of its mouth, like it was dripping down off of its mouth. Its face was red with blood. It had killed something, and its legs had blood. And he goes, I say legs, but they weren't really legs, were they? No. Because it lifted up its arms, which turned out to be arms, and it was running on all fours and coming toward them, and it ran around to the side of the truck, where he goes, eventually I had to throw it in drive and try to make some distance.
Yeah.
He goes, and it stopped and kind of skidded. He's like, and he goes, and I looked it in the eye. He goes, and it looked like a person in the eyes. He said, this looked like a man. He's like, I thought it was like, I said, what is that? And he goes, my friend behind me, the one that was intuitive, he goes, it's a werewolf. He's like, he's like, everybody was screaming and panicking. Hector and Adam were screaming and panicking. He goes, my friend in the back behind me wasn't even panicking. He says, you need to drive as fast as you can. Everybody keep the windows up. And he said that this thing ran alongside the truck. He goes, and it knew exactly what to do because it reached for my door handle and started yanking on it to try to pull me out of that vehicle. He said this thing was, he goes, if I didn't know any better, I would think it was smiling and enjoying what it was doing. He said it was animalistic. He goes, but it had a human level intelligence. It maybe went even beyond, like, it was not a human. Too smart. He's like, and then as we began to finally get some, speed, whatever, he's like, this thing just kept running alongside the truck. He goes, and I got up to 40, 50, 60. He goes, at about 60, he goes, we were like, okay, I think we lost it. He's like, and we just booked. He's like, and the main house was a long ways away from where we were at, and it was dark. He goes, we got turned around, and we see the bunkhouse. And this property, the way it's built too, it's like the main house is not on that property. It's across the way, and there's like 20 acres, and that's where the main property is. It's not on this 300 acres. And you have to get out and stop and open a fence. And he's like, we got to make it to the fence, and his friend that was in the back said, no, Jay. He said, no. He goes, if we go and try to get out of this vehicle, it will attack us and it will kill us. It will unalive us. And so they said, okay, well, what do we do? He's like, we just drive around. And he goes, I have a tank of gas. Are we supposed to drive around until the morning? And his friend said, yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah. He's like, but I'm in this gas guzzling dually truck. And I know a lot of my friends got them. A lot of my friends are hickish, hillbilly country people. It's just what they do. In my hometown, people where I live, where I'm from, they're just country people. They drive around in big trucks and they guzzle gas. And this thing just, so they lost it, but they didn't. They were looking in the rearview mirror. The moon, they could see. I don't know how full the moon was, but they could see. And he said, dude, we turned around and like in a circle, and we didn't see it. And we had to drive back in that direction because we were driving away from the exit. He goes, Adam was like, hey, we need to go and get out of here. We need to get out to the main road and get out of here. And they're like, are you going to get out and open the gate? And then there was no answer. So the answer to that was, I guess, no.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes, we drove around and he goes, we get down to the bunkhouse and I stop. And Jay, the guy that was behind, I'm not going to say his name, almost said his name, was behind me. He says, he goes, what are you doing? He goes, no. He's like, keep driving. He's like, dude, it's 12:20 a.m. He goes, I got less than half a tank of gas. A little bit less than half a tank of gas. He's like, I can't drive around until 6, 7 in the morning. And he goes, well, you better try. And while they're sitting there debating and talking and arguing, they hear this whack on the back window. And there's this crack noise. And they look back, and this thing is in the back of their truck. It's in the bed of the truck, and it's kind of like on all fours, but it's using its hand, paw, whatever, to break through the glass. At that point, they were just like turning around, screaming and yelling, and Jay said, drive, drive, do not stop. I already told you. And he goes, okay. So he guns it. He scraped the front part of his truck against the back of the bunkhouse. But luckily, he goes, it worked out because he goes, we did this really sharp turn and we kind of did a donut and this thing rolled out of my truck. He's like, how it got back there, I have no idea. I told him, this is what I think, because I told him, I said, when you did not see this thing, I believe that it crawled
down on all fours, like low crawl.
Mm-hmm. It crawled into the back of the bed of your truck and laid flat.
Did that spider crawl.
Mm-hmm. And I told him about that. I said, these things can do a spider crawl. He goes, no, I know. I seen it. Well, the way he talks, he says, I seen it.
Yeah.
He said, I seen it. I said, when? He goes, well, let me get to that part. And he's like, he got really excited. He goes, we had rifles. He goes, and the thing rolled out. I saw it, and then it stood up. He goes, and when it stood up, it popped its back, like its chest popped out. He's like, and it made the most ungodly, my words. He said, the most ungodly howl you'll ever, it was unbelievable. He goes, it went through all of our bodies. I told him what that was. I said, that's infrasound. I said, I've talked to police officers who've had that go through them. Yeah. I said, what happened to you was like, I was like, that's a terrifying thing. I was like, but believe it or not, man, he goes, you were in a vehicle. Thank goodness. At that point. He goes, well, and spoiler alert, they didn't stay in it. I'll tell you what happened. Young men, they don't always make the best decisions. They kept driving, and then they drove into the tank.
Oh.
Yeah, because like I said, there were 3 or 4 of them there. They drove into another one. And then they ended up having to drive through it, and vehicle it was kind of touch and go. And then this thing was relentless. It showed up and was coming up behind the truck. At that point, it was about 20 yards out from that point. And they drove back out. Thank God they didn't roll over, because this thing would have just gone on. It would have just tore them apart. He said, we got up out of that tank, and the tank was like kind of flat on one side and kind of had a lip on that side where they were at. He goes, we were sideways. He goes, gee, and I asked him this. I said, how do you think you got out of that situation there? He goes, Jesus. He said, at that point, he said, we were trying to call for help. He's like, but that area out there is a dead zone. It's well known. There's no cell service out there. He's like, and it was a dead zone. He goes, and it's like this thing knew exactly, to keep us pinned. We couldn't get to the north side of the property where there was cell service. He's like, and we were so discombobulated. Well, that's my words, but that's what he was saying. They were just so disoriented. And I said, that's good, though, that you had faith, because Hector was praying out loud, and Adam was praying out loud, and Jay was praying out loud, and they were all like, God, help us. Jesus, help us. He goes, and then this thing stopped and just kind of faded off into the darkness. And then they were like, you know what? We're fine. And they sat there in the truck and they said, we need to get back to the north side of the property, which is just right in that one corner of the property where they can use they can get cell service. He's like, but we're so far out there, man. It'll take the sheriff's department forever. We had an incident with somebody who wrecked out there, and it took the sheriff's department over an hour to get there. Person nearly died, nearly bled to death. They said, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah.
I said, but you had Jesus and you have firearms. He said, yeah. He's like, but I looked at my gun and I didn't think it would do much to this thing. They didn't have no lightweight weapons. I mean, they had, hunting rifles, all of them. Not all of them were the same, but yeah, they had some. And they, being that they were hunting hogs, and a couple of them had ARs and some other things that I'm not going to get into, but they had firepower. And so they took off, they turned and were driving, and they said, you know what? Maybe we should go to the bunkhouse. And they're like, I think we're safer in the truck. And then there was this big argument. And then get this. As they were driving along, they ran over something. And they hear, psh.
Oh, God.
And they're like, what in the hell was that? They look back, and there was a piece of what looks like some sort of old farm equipment that was on the property at one point. It had been drug over there and laid down, and they ran right over it, not even thinking it. And they said the crazy thing was that it looked like it wasn't there before. And it looked like whatever did it, they had to be supernaturally strong and fast to be able to go and grab that piece of equipment and pull it there. He's like, and it was just a piece of scrap is what it was. But it had like sharp pieces on it. Front two tires completely busted. One of the back tires was busted. He's like, and now he's like, our truck is running flat. So we thought, okay, maybe we should try to make it to the north end of the property. They're like, no way we're going to make it to the north end of the property. And they said, he said, why? And Adam says, look, and this thing was coming back. And it wasn't running towards him because it didn't have to. It was walking. He goes, and we gunned it. He goes, and the tire came off of the rim. It was shredded. The front passenger side tire. The front passenger side tire was shredded. He's like, and it came off the rim. It was, and we were like, and we were still trying to drive. He's like, at that point, he goes, I just said, let's go. And I jumped out and I ran into the bunkhouse and the guys went with me. He's like, my one friend, Hector, and I talked to him and I asked him why he did this. He stopped and he unloaded an entire magazine on this thing. He said, I figured if we could pump some rounds into it, maybe it would kill it. He said, in the eyes, it did look human. Yes, Plymouth. This is a wolf-like creature, werewolf, dogman. I don't know what you want to call it. So this thing runs around the truck, chases Hector right inside. He turns at this point. He's got a .45 handgun, pumps a bunch of rounds into it. He says, I got it point blank, but it was just, you could see it hitting it. You could see blood. There wasn't the smoke or blackness or anything like that. He's like, but it was just kind of like flinching and falling backwards. And then I was like, did it fall? He goes, no, it just kind of like it fell back. Like, in other words, took some steps back and was hunching, like hunkering down was his words. Hunched over, I would imagine. They closed the door. He's like, there's this sliding door and there's this big wooden, latch that's on there. He's like, here's the thing I knew about the bunkhouse. He's like, these bunkhouses were well fortified. He said there were these huge logs that were from cedar trees. They had cut them and they had put them 3 with these metal sheets, and there were metal sheets on the outside. There were like 2 layers. He goes, and somebody welded these things together. It was crazy with bolts too.
Hmm.
He's like, and I knew it. I told him, I said, this thing is fortified. Why these vaqueros and cowboys felt the need to fortify these bunkhouses, who knows? He said one of the bunkhouses on one of the adjacent properties, and there was a guy that they were good friends with named Chad. They had talked to him one day, and he showed them something that his grandpa had showed him about the bunkhouse. These bunkhouses were made the same way, but now they're on 3 different properties. But at one time, it was all one big ranch, one big property, right? And so he showed him this torn metal, like it had been peeled back by claws. I know. I saw this because when I had my encounter, my neighbor down the road, well, it would have been the neighbor of my friend, but I ended up staying there too for a while. He saw these 2 werewolf-like creatures break into his shed because there was a deer carcass back there. And there was this peeled back metal. And when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, like 14, whatever, before I had my Dogman encounter, I was like, what in the hell did this? And I told my friend that I went to school with, I said, has your dad ever told you how this happened? Like, how did this happen? Has your grandpa ever said anything? I asked him because we were back there one time messing around, bunch of us kids. Well, we're teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody was back there. We were probably doing stuff we weren't supposed to be doing. I didn't really drink or smoke and none of that until I was in my later teens. So I wasn't doing anything like that, but other people were. And I was probably too young to be out there hanging around. Let's put it that way. And the metal looked like it had been peeled back. So that's what he saw. He says, dude, I saw this. He's like, me and Adam went over there and the metal had been torn, peeled. And he's like, so while we're there in the bunkhouse, he goes, we hear this banging, banging, banging. And then we hear this, which sounds like something ripping into the metal. He's like, and I asked him this. I said, do you think that this thing had some sort of like supernatural ability or qualities to it? He said, I do. He says, because if it was just based on that thing, he goes, even if, how apes are stronger than people,
Oh, yeah.
We talked about that. And he goes, even if this thing was like a chimpanzee and it had all this, it's not going to be able to use its claws to tear through the metal. He's like, it made a slit. He goes, and then we see these claws and then fingers start to peel it down, push it down. He goes, and then we see the eyes. It was looking in at us. It was looking around. He goes, and then he goes, it didn't do it again. He said the reason that he thinks that it didn't do it again, because I think it took it a lot of energy, a lot of effort to do that, and it probably wasn't comfortable. So it didn't do it again. Because then we heard it jump up, climbing, and it was on the roof, stomping around. And we were watching it. We could see the sand, the dust coming, there was all this dust out there falling onto the floor from the roof. This creature was stomping around up there. So he's up there and he's like, it's crawling around, and they're like, what in the hell? And so one of them, Adam, decides he's going to take a shot at it. And before anybody could say, hey, don't do that, Jay grabs him and says, he goes, that gun is not going to work. You're just going to give it away to tear into us. because unfortunately the roof was less fortified. There weren't 2 layers of metal, it was just one. He's like, and another thing, he's like, the metal was sinking in from the weight of this thing. So at that point, they were like, just going to have to sit there and wait and watch and see what this thing would do. How long is it going to bounce around up there? He goes, it was like, it seemed like forever. And then the sound stopped. And then every now and then we'd hear a noise up there. We knew it was just up there. He's like, and then it was 1:30. He's like, this has been going on for over an hour. He's like, and then it was 2:00 and then 3:00. He goes, and then finally, a little bit after 3:00, he's like, it started up again. We heard this like it was running on the roof. It jumps down and then it begins to tear into the sides of the building. The interesting thing about this bunkhouse, and I asked him this too, I said, there's no windows? He says, no. He said it looked like at one time there were windows on either side, but they had been boarded up and sheet metaled. I was like, oh.
Just trapped in a box with this thing trying to get in, basically. That's just nerve-wracking, dude.
Yeah. Hey, Mel, how you doing? Mel was on the show Friday. Mel Great House. Creepy stuff up there, Mel. So, Paul, Paranormal Paul, how's it going, Paul? How you doing? So, what ended up happening with this thing? He said, I look over. He's like, and everybody is terrified. Everybody is terrified. He goes, but Jay just has his head down and he's like this and he's praying. And he stands up and he tells his friends, he says, we're going to be fine. He's like, we're going to be fine. He goes, put down the guns. The guns are not going to help us. He goes, turn to Christ. And then they started arguing. And Hector's like, he goes, yeah, put down the guns because I just shot it like 15 times and it did nothing. It did nothing. It bled, but it's still up there jumping around. And then Adam starts talking and he's like, there was blood already on it. What was it fighting with something? Why was it bleeding? And then Riley's like, none of this matters. We're just arguing. Why are we arguing? This is not going to solve anything. He's like, the bottom line is this. He's like, there's a furry, demonic werewolf running around out there, and we're trapped in here. We have no cell service. The thing laid a trap. It messed up my truck. He goes, my truck's all tore up. He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. He's like, and now we're arguing. And then Adam said something snarky to Jay. He goes, all you've done is pray this whole time. He goes, and then Hector stepped in and said, you know what? Maybe that's why we're not dead. And then Riley's like that, and maybe because we have weapons and it doesn't want to get shot, maybe it won't kill it, but it hurts it. So he's like, maybe it won't kill it, but it hurts it. And so it doesn't want to be shot. So at a little after 3:00, it starts back up. Now, I thought that was interesting. And if you're a veteran of this show, you already know why at 3:00 it started up again. It got its second wind and started its maniacal, like, Zoe, I don't know if you're trolling. I've never seen you before in this chat, and now you're saying all kinds of stuff. I don't know if you're being serious or not, but if you are playing around, just excuse yourselves, or we don't have to do it for you. If you're being serious, send me your email and we can talk. So this thing decides to start literally tearing into the sheet metal where it had made the hole, the slit.
Mhm.
And it was just pulling and pulling and pulling, and it rolled it down. And then it sticks its snout in, and he goes, dude, this thing was massive. And it had torn this big hole that was about a foot. He's like, and then it was like almost a foot and a half, and its head was coming through, and it was looking around at us. He's like, and I made a business decision at that point. He's like, and in the bunkhouse, he goes, we kept a few weapons down there. He goes, and one of them was a slug throwing shotgun. It's a tactical. He's like, and I fired a couple of hard rounds right into its head. It made this noise and fell backwards. He's like, and he goes, and I don't know what happened. He goes, I just got emboldened at that point. And he goes, and I ran over to where this hole was. And get this, Riley tells me, he goes, this is the truth, man. He goes, I stuck the weapon out, to kind of look. And he goes, and it grabbed it and yanked it. And he goes, and it nearly took my finger off, and it fired it again, but it obviously was not in the line of fire. He goes, and then I heard the pow. Like the post outside, it was smashing the gun against the post. He's like, and I hit it in the head. He goes, I had a flashlight too. And he goes, and we were looking through the hole, like at a distance. And he's like, and I saw it standing there. He goes, and I saw it like digging in its head.
What?
He said there was like a hole right there in its head, and it was like digging in it, like it was pulling out matter or something. And it was lowering its head. And he goes, it wasn't stopping it. He's like, so we all just went to the middle and just sat there. And then he's like, Jay said, hey, let's hold hands and pray. And of course, Adam started being mocking and arguing, and Hector started arguing with him, and then everybody started arguing again. He goes, and Jay stands up, and he's like, and he always wore this crucifix. He's like, he goes, me and Jay were not Catholic. He's like, Hector and Adam were Catholic. He goes, I was raised, not Catholic, non-denominational. He's like, and Jay had left the Catholic Church, and he had not found a church at that time. But now he's super religious. But he said, he's like, he stands up and he goes, we need to pray. He goes, and there was a Bible there in the bunkhouse. He goes, and he gets it. He's like, and he opens it up. He goes, and I can't even tell you. He was reading the words of Christ. That's all I know. He goes, I couldn't focus. He goes, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I couldn't even focus on what he was saying. He's like, but I began to pray. Pray, as we would say, pray in earnest. Like you really, really believe what you're saying. You're praying. He's like, and the whole time I just keep hearing this thing running around the building, smashing into it, trying to get in, trying to find a weak point. He goes, we even saw it trying to dig into the floor, the bottom where the floor met the metal,
Mm-hmm.
It was like digging and tearing into that. He's like, and then I heard something smashing into my truck, like it was destroying my truck. He goes, my head and my hands. He's like, and I am sitting there going like, it's tearing up my only means of transportation. It's destroying, and he goes, I want it out there so bad to just nail this thing. He said about 4:00 comes, about 4. He's like, it was almost 4:00. He said, Jay gets up. He goes, and he walks over to the door. He's like, and in absolute horror, we're standing there, and we're like, Jay, what are you doing? Jay, what are you doing? And he lifts the wood that holds the, you know, the
Uh-huh.
thing in place to keep the, and he just slings open the door. He's like, and everybody's like, what are you doing? Like, everybody is freaking out. He goes, we are in absolute shock of what this kid's doing, man. We're like, Jay, what are you doing? And then he walks out into the night. He's like, and we're all looking at each other. He goes, and Hector, he goes, I'll be honest, Hector, he's a little braver than me. He's like, Jay is absolutely fearless. Hector is not nearly as fearless as Jay because he doesn't have his faith, but he has a lot of faith in firearms.
Yeah.
And he's a marksman. He's a great shot. He goes, I've hunted with him. He always bags a buck every year. So he goes, he follows behind him and he goes, come on, guys, come on. And he's like, no, come on, guys. And Adam is like, no. He's already seen this Bigfoot creature throw a log at him, and now he's witnessing a werewolf. He said, no. He goes, I didn't want to come here. Y'all made me come here, and now I'm going to die. He's like, my mother told me not to come with you. And Riley turns around and he goes, you sound just like my brother, a big sissy. He goes, yeah, and your brother was abducted by a freaking werewolf when he was a kid. He goes, it wasn't a werewolf. He started arguing, you know. And he's like, it wasn't a werewolf. I don't know what it was. They said it was a man in a fur coat. He goes, and that's a man in a fur coat out there, right? Is that what they're going to tell us? Is that what they're going to say? They started arguing back and forth. It went on and on. They marched outside. While they're arguing, and then they stop. There's no noise. There's nothing. And Jay's walking around the building with a flashlight by himself. And he comes back around and he says, the Holy Spirit has told me that it's gone. And they're like, really? Now, you can't blame these guys for not. They don't have this guy's faith.
Yeah.
They're like, okay. Because they don't know. It kind of reminds me of that ghost in the Ghost in the Darkness, where he's like, the ghosts in the darkness have come. And he's like, in English? You know, like, what is this guy talking about?
Yeah, but Jay's walking by faith, not by sight.
That's right. So Jay comes back around and he says, it's gone. And he says, how? This is what Jay says. Jay tells a fantastical story to these guys. He says, let's walk. He's like, I'm not walking anywhere. He goes, if you stay here, it will return, regardless of night or day. This thing does not change at night. He says, God showed me what this is. Walk. He said, dude, it was the most nerve-wracking hour of my life. Every noise. Now imagine being these guys. It gives me the chills. Imagine being these guys. Put yourself in that position, folks. Look at what just happened. I told you earlier in the week that this was a crazy story. That was really, and I got more information from them and more. It's nuts what happened to these guys. I'm going to be honest at this point. I'm a little jaded. Anthony, you've heard people tell encounters, and we're just kind of like, yeah, that's crazy. It never ceases to amaze me. But at this point in time, 10 years of getting just direct face-to-face people telling us too.
Mm-hmm.
And having collected encounters for over 30 years, at least. You get a little jaded sometimes. Happens. But when someone tells you, there are stories that come along when they tell you, and then it's backed up by more than one person, and you're like, holy crap. That's why this one was so compelling. I mean, it was, it had me on the edge of my seat. I'm like, dude, this is crazy. Scared the shit out of me. Excuse my language. So I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this guy. And he says, dude, I was walking. He goes, and then he goes, I look to my right and I see at the edge of the wood line this thing come out of the woods. He's like, but it wasn't that creature. He's like, it looked like a being. The only way I could describe it was like it was about 8 or 9 feet tall. It was humanoid shaped because I saw our limbs moving. And it looked like a being wearing a solid white robe. And it was emanating light. He's like, and Jay is walking and he raises his hand toward this being. Like he raises his hand, like he's waving his hand. And he goes, we're all dumbfounded. He goes, I want to talk, but I can't. He goes, then the being just kind of parallels us going along the tree line. And he had something in his hand. He's like, and I'm going to tell you this, Josh. He goes, you're not going to believe what I'm telling you. He's like, but it looked like some sort of sword or weapon or staff. I couldn't really make it out. It was holding it downward. He's like, and it had like what looked like a flame on it. Like there was a fire, like a long stick with fire.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I couldn't say for sure that that's what it was. It was about 150 yards away. He's like, but I could see it. It was a person. It was there. It was like a humanoid shape. And he's like, and I don't know. He's like, and Jay has his arm raised up, and Hector and Adam are like, what is that? Who is that? What is that? And he says, don't worry. God's got us. We're good. He turns around. He's walking backwards, very nonchalant. He goes, it's over. This thing is not going to hurt us. He goes, we're never going to see this thing again. And he's like, how do you know this? Like, what are you talking about? He goes, don't even worry about it. He's like, it's gone. He's like, we get up to the gate. We open we walk out. He's like, and we start walking down the road. He goes, and that's nerve-wracking because you're on this gravel road and there's these trees on both sides and then there's pastures everywhere. He goes, and we walked about 2 miles. He goes, and then at one point, he's like, Hector hits me on the shoulder. He goes, and we have our rifles, we're not unarmed. He's like, and I turn and I look. He goes, and look. He goes, and there, standing in the middle of the road was that being again, standing there in the road. And I told him, I said, I've heard of things like this. I've only got 2 stories that would match up to this one, but they're not nearly as, dramatic. That's something like that would match up to that exact description. Now, I've heard of other things, but this is, compelling. He's like, can we keep walking? He's like, and then he goes, we get self-service. And we're like, our phones are working. Our phones are working. He's like, and then we're calling. We're calling for a ride. He goes, and then Jay turns around. He says, don't call the police. He's like, you can, but they're not going to do anything for us. He's like, and then it's just going to make things harder if you ever need them for something because they're not going to want to help you. And then Jay gets down on one knee and begins to pray in the middle of the road. And at that point, Pam drives up. And she's like, get in. And they all pile into her big truck, and then they book out of there. They get back to the ranch house. Her dad, who's sick, he comes to the kitchen table. He's not even supposed to be standing upright. He's supposed to be laying down in bed. And by all accounts, he was a great man, a very nice, giving, loving man. And he was a very God-fearing man. And he pulled out the Bible, and he had a kocha, like a blanket, draped over him. And he goes, and they were sitting there. He's like, and it wasn't even cold. And he was shivering, and he looked pale. And he said, God wants me to do this. This is her father. And they all prayed. Jay kept getting up and going to the door. And he's like, finally, we walked out and we looked out the door and we could see that being still there by the tree line. He had followed them. He goes, and Jay walked out and went across the field and went up to this being, and they disappeared into the woods. He's like, and he goes, and I'm telling you, he's like, Josh, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. He goes, and my wife's dad, because now they're married now, but he's like, Pam's dad, my wife, my current wife, he's like, he told us, he says, that's an angel of the Lord. He's like, I was dreaming. He goes, but now I know it wasn't a dream. He goes, I was watching this monster, and it killed one of our cows, and it was devouring it. And when it saw you guys, it decided to go and kill you. He's like, this thing wasn't doing it out of hunger. It was doing it out of evil, spite, and malice. And this part's interesting. And Pam said this. She's like, my dad, she goes, he has no knowledge of any of this stuff. He hadn't read Edidorpa or any of this, the smoky god, none of this stuff that we've talked about on the show. He said this being comes from hell, a form of hell, which she believes now. It's a realm. It's a place, a level below the earth. That's where it comes from. It comes out of the earth. And now the daylight comes. Jay comes out of the woods. He comes into the house and he tells them, he says, I was talking to one of God's angels. And this is weird to me. This is very weird. Nothing like this has happened to me. I've had a lot of weird things happen, but this is very bizarre. So he comes and he says, he tells Hector, he says, I was talking to an angel of the Lord. And he says, what is this angel? And he says, he belongs to a type of race, of species of angels. And these angels work for Michael, Saint Michael. That's not Saint Michael, but he's one of his, he commands them. He goes, and this particular being, he's like, comes from underground. The same exact thing that Pam's dad had said.
Yep.
He watched it ascend from the earth. He goes, there is a hole out there where these things come from, and there's more than one. He's like, we need to get that covered up. So for the next 3 days, they had to drive around and look for it based on the description, because he was too ill to go and show them. They find this big hole and they cover it up. The hole smelled like blood and urine and sulfur. Sound familiar? Yeah. When this angelic being communed with Jay, Jay told them, he says, this thing told me that we are in danger. And that the only thing we can do to protect ourselves is to pray to God and pray in earnest. Now, he didn't say that. Those are my words. He said, to pray like you mean it. Now, there are people who will tell me that this is not true. These people are putting me on, or it's make-believe, whatever. I don't believe that. Thank you for that donation. It's a neat name. So here is a guy, Riley, who was not religious, who had no real, he went to church with his parents, but he was not, his mother and his dad really didn't push it on him. His mother was like mine. She had left the Catholic Church, kind of disillusioned. And he believed this was real. And he goes, I saw it with my own eyes. He goes, Adam was terrified. He goes, he would not come back to the ranch. He's like, he had just coming back. He's like, to this day, I don't think he's ever set foot back there again. He had just been coming back. He's like, Hector, He goes, he'll go out on horseback now. Nobody sees anything in this area. He goes, but our neighbors do. And when we try to tell the neighbors what they need to do, whatever, he goes, they wouldn't listen. So they did several things. They took rock salt and they put it on the four corners of the ranch, right? On all the different places where the fences were on both sides of the property. He's like, we did some different things. He's like, and then we put water. It was blessed. And we put the water, we sprinkled it all over the fence line everywhere. We've had no problems. We got rid of the hole. He's like, and now we work the ranch as no problems. We don't have these issues. He's like, but it's happening all around us. And he knew the other guys too. And I told him, I said, do you know Josh? I said, yeah. He goes, he had an issue. He's like, and my former father-in-law, he goes, he passed away, you know, he goes, you know, that was the old guy that was sick, you know. And he said, dude, he had an encounter with him and his brother when they were young. But he said, I know somebody, he goes, who had an encounter with something you're going to be interested in. And I said, really? Who? What is that? And he said, my sister. He's like, I think my sister and my brother, the ones that he talked about being afraid, you know, they were superstitious or whatever, they had the eye. That's what I believe. That's what I told him. Thank you for that donation, Brianna. Thank you for those that donated. Thank you to Shadows and Mary Angel Magdalene with a sweet name. I'm glad that I can do what I do and get to talk to all these crazy stories, and these wonderful people who are willing to share their stories. I want to say a personal thank you to the people who talked to me today and then, you know, a couple of weeks ago, who gave me their encounters. And for trusting Albert. Albert, thank you so much. You've been a huge help and getting people to give me their stories. And I am glad to hear an update that Albert and his daughter aren't having problems and the Lechusa thing is not happening now. They had a shadow spirit being in their house, which is terrifying. We talked about those with Melvin Greathouse. I want to apologize before I get into this next encounter. I want to apologize to Melvin because I had the notes to another Melvin. So I was going to have him on in April. Okay. And totally messed up. I had those notes, you know, for Melvin's stuff. And I did not have yours. I was going to try it. So I thought you were coming on in April and he was coming on. So got the two Melvins mixed up, but it worked out, right? Friday was a great show. It was a good show. Go back and listen. And so we ended up talking about all kinds of stuff, spirits and shadow people. And poor Melvin got basically accosted by an evil spirit, something that grabbed him by his shoulders. And yeah, the other Melvin is the one that had the reptilian encounter or whatever in New Mexico. So sorry for getting those mixed up, but we'll get it. Still worked out, man. It still worked out. Just put your faith in God. That's what you got to do. Marlo Martin. And I know people that don't like me talking about God. I've had people send me some snarky messages, you know, and there was one that wasn't too long ago. And they were telling me, yeah, I like your show. You just talk about God too much. And I'm like, well, then don't watch. I'd prefer you not watch. If you're going to be offended by my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and his Father, don't watch, because his Father is who I worship. Right? So, you know, sorry, not sorry. It's the way it is. If I lose people, then that's what it is. I always say this, and I say this every day, and you should say the same. By his grace, we live. By his grace, we die. And when you die, it's just a threshold to another life. So there you go. I don't do it to get people. There's some people whose audience is really Christian, and so they put on a little show and a dog and pony show and facade and do whatever that is that they do so they can get people to come and listen and watch and whatever. And I don't do that. I don't do it for opinions. I don't do it for the praise or whatever to be known as a good guy, because being known as a good guy is not going to get you into heaven. It's not going to get you in there, God, the source. That's not going to save you from a hell realm. Right? Do what's right when nobody's looking. Help people. When I give people help too, I usually tell them too, don't tell anybody. Keep it between us. I helped you. And the reason I do that is because I don't need everybody to go around saying what it is I do or don't do. God knows, and that's what's important. It's not important that you go and tell everybody. Go shout it from the rooftops that I helped you. You don't need to do that. You don't. Thank you for that donation. That's a big one. Appreciate that. Stefan Dozier, thank you so much. We have definitely can use it. We have actually not been doing too good financially, but like everything, I think it'll work out. If you ask me right, I'm 100%. I'm good because I know that God will take care of me. He always does. There's never been a time when I've lost my faith. I thought, I'm not going to make it. I was talking to someone recently it's an old friend of mine who's dying. And I said, how do you feel? He goes, I'm afraid, but I'm not. I said, what do you mean? He says, because I know that I got God. And I said, there you go. You face it with the same ferocity you face life. And that guy is a real tough guy. I've known him for years. He's a tough man. And this is his second bout with cancer. It came back. And so, you know, I don't know. I got 3 friends right now that are battling different things. I was thinking about I got a cousin, Ralph, who's needs a heart transplant. He's not going to get it. Because, there's a waiting list. And so he's probably not going to be able to get it before he passes. So he's going to have to make his peace with God. And I don't know. I need to get in touch with him and talk to him. And it's a hard thing. You got to give that energy to do it. You got to be ready. You can't just call willy-nilly and hope for the best. You got to be prepared. You got to pray and get these things, get yourself right so that you can help others. My eyes are burning. So thank you, Alan, for that donation. We appreciate it. Now, here's what happened. He says, talk to my sister. Right? So here we go. So I call her up. This guy answers. This is kind of funny. This guy answers the phone, and he's like, who is this? And I'm like, I'm looking for Ashley. I'm like, he goes, yeah, who are you? And I said, is this her number? He goes, yeah, this is her number. Why are you calling? And I'm like, dude, this guy he was not happy that a guy was calling. He's like, I'm her husband. And I said, hey, look, man. He's like, no, you look, man. Like, I was like, I started talking fast. I said, look, I'm the host of Paranormal Roundtable. He goes, up for what? I said, the host of Paranormal Roundtable. I do a show. I'm like, I'm friends. And I started naming the different people. And I said, and Riley told me. And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, so how do you know? I said, he told me to get in touch with her. She has a story that I'm supposed to get. And he says, okay. And he kind of stops for a minute. He goes, my bad. He goes, I don't know. I guess he goes, there's been a lot of tension lately. He goes, her ex has been calling from different numbers and he uses fake accounts. But I'm like, I told him, I said, believe me, I know how that works. Not with my wife or whatever, but I know there's people that do that. And so me and him kind of hit it off. He's a pretty cool guy. He's a construction worker. Well, he's not just a worker. He's a foreman. And he's a pretty good guy. I liked him. And he gave me a Lechusa story. There again, it was another one that happened to his mother. And it was terrifying. So that whole South Texas, it just kind of opened up a whole can of worms. Like I was like, whoa. So This is what happened. This one here I got when I finally got in touch because she was actually in the shower, and then he said, "Hey, can she call you back?" But then me and him ended up talking and hitting it off, and then she got out, and then she was like, "Hey," and she was very nice. She's a very bubbly and sweet person. She's like, "I'm sorry." She's like, "My ex is," but I said, "I don't apologize. He's already told me the situation, and all you can do is pray about it and protect yourself." And she says, "We will." She's like, "Hey," she goes, "So," she's like, "this really wasn't my encounter." She's like, "It happened to my best friend who at the time was my boss in an office that we were working at." She's like, "I've had a couple things happen. They were spirit ghost things or whatever." And she gave me her stuff. And so what I'm going to do is do a show one night where I just do all the small encounters, and I got about 30 or 40 of them. And I'm just going to machine gun rapid fire them. And I'm just going to literally name it 30 encounters because I already got it. I partway got it laid out between that and trying to mess with my taxes. I was like, I got it partway laid out how I want to do it. I kind of have a vision of how I want it to happen. I think that'll be a neat show, right? I mean, tell me what you think. I don't know. Do you want to hear like 30 or 40, like real quick encounters? Because that's the only way to get those out because somebody comes on and can't really tell. How do you stretch that into an hour, 2 hours? You can't. And you can't, and you'd have to tell a bunch of them, right? I like to throw those in there whenever we're talking and I'm on other people's shows, and I'll be like, "Hey, this happened to such and such at this time, whatever, blah blah blah, and it has to do with what you're talking about." So that's kind of how I get those out of there. I throw those out there. But I mean, I think that'd be a good idea. So this one was, get this. So I get in touch with her boss, and or not boss, her friend, and I don't know her. All right. And she's got a cool nickname. They call her, well, that's not her nickname, but that's what her mother calls her. It's a Lyric. Calls her Lyric. So I'm not going to tell you that's her real name, because I don't think she really wants everybody knowing who she is, but that's what her mother called her growing up. And she's very musically inclined. So that makes sense. So they call her Lyric. And so Lyric gave me, this one was not a super long, super whatever in-depth encounter, but I have another one that I'm going to tell you at another time. In fact, I tell you what, because like I said, I'll eventually tell that story, but I may just tell it tomorrow on the Patreon, the other Black Eyed Kid story, the longer one, and that'll be the story for tomorrow on the Patreon. But if I tell it on Patreon, I will tell it to you guys too, because I'm not going to put anything behind a paywall, like I said, keeping my word. But I will tell it on the Patreon tomorrow. So if you want to hear it, join the Patreon. But I will retell it at a later date on the regular show. Is that fair?
Yeah, of course. I think that's fair. That way everybody gets access to the same encounters.
So here's what Lyric told me. She says, I used to get up every morning at 5 a.m. I had to get ready. The kids had to be ready for school. I have two kids. Now they're older. She's 42 now. Her kids are getting older. She's like, I had my kids when I was really young. By her admission, she goes, I was stupid and I married a baboso.
A lot of that going around.
Cracks me up. Who refused to work. That's the biggest problem. When she said that, I was like, what is wrong with you? You're going to marry a guy who don't want to work?
That's the bare minimum.
You at least got to get your butt up, put your boots on, man. Like, come on, man. So anyways, they went through a really nasty divorce. She's like, he might have had a job, she said, for about a year and a half. The whole 10 years we were married. She said it might have been a year and a half. He tried to do everything but work. Believe me, I know people like that. I hate to say it, but I've had friends and family like that. I mean, there's just people like that. They don't want to work. They'll do anything to not work. They'll put more energy into not working than actually going to work. If you just got your butt up and went to work, you would burn less calories.
Or they always have some money-making scheme going on and then never have any money.
That's what this guy was doing all the time.
Yeah.
But he never had any money, and she was always supporting him. And she's like, and I worked. She goes, at one point, she's like, Mr. Wolf, she called me Mr. Wolf. She says, I was working 2 jobs, and this guy wasn't working at all. She's like, so I had a very strict regimen. I worked out. She's like, now he worked out. He was a gym rat. He was always in the gym. I said, well, what good does that do if you don't work? I went to the gym last night for an hour and 15 minutes. And I just finished working my shift. Like I worked, several hours and then went to the gym.
Yeah.
So what's his excuse? She's like, oh, he was going to be a bodybuilder, but he would slack off and then, he wouldn't do it, like not do it correctly. So, so not a good guy, but she had a lot of issues, and she said it was mentally things were happening. And this could be, as Abe always says, the spiritual opening, that the Achilles heel of good Christian people, that this happens to them. Maybe this is it. I don't know. But she encountered something on her morning. She goes, I would get up. She goes, I'd put on my workout clothes. And she goes, I'd go for a jog. She's like, 5 a.m. I'd be back by 6. She's like, I'd go to the gym, do my workout. What a schedule, right?
Yeah.
Then she would come back home. The kids would be get the kids up for school by 7:30, and then them out the door by 8:30, and then, whatever. And then she's off to work every day. Go to bed by 9. Kids are in bed. She's in bed. Husband's playing video games, smoking pot. Awesome. Yeah, that is not the way to be, guys. Gentlemen, listen to me. Okay? Women can be a pain in the ass. They can annoy you. They can do whatever. But you're a pain in the ass too. And it's your job to be a man. You know what it is to be a man? It's not just being strong and having muscles or whatever. It takes a lot to be a man and to be a dad. Do what's right. I'll tell you who's a good dad, who's a real man, is Anthony's dad.
Yeah.
Recently, him and one of his younger brothers tried to get together to help him get a car. And he flat out refused because he goes, I don't want to take something and then you guys want to get a vehicle and then you can't because you're, I'm like, I told him, I said, Marty, his name is Marty too, not my business partner Marty, but it's a different Marty. I said, they already got their vehicles. I mean, he goes, I won't do it.
I tried to get Dad to accept, but he's just like, nope. I love you, son, and that's why I love you. Because you're trying to do this for me, but I'm not going to take anything from you.
And Anthony and Adrian work hard. Y'all work a lot, and he works for Tesla, and Anthony runs our security company, and they make good money. Decent, money.
Mm-hmm.
Good money would be like, but y'all make decent money. And, he just wouldn't do it. He's like, no, I work. And he's well past the age where he should be able to retire, but not now, not in this country. Can't do that. I don't want to say, you should retire at the age of 70. Why don't we just die? That's how we retire. Why don't we just go with, you're 80, you just fall over and that's your retirement. But let's not do too much for the American people because then you'll have the zombies pissed off. They're stealing money from you. Yeah, you need to stop that. Leave those oppressors alone. The retardation is strong with you. You do the voice. I can see that the retardation has taken hold. Right? Has now betrayed you. No, it's not true. I would never join you. I love being stupid. Take my money. Take my ball. Take my ass. Where are they? We found them. Go away. I'm cleaning my room. We want to give you $5,000. Get away from me. Go away. Leave police alone. Whatever. Enough of that. Okay, look. So anyway, this woman, somebody says, "Holy bananas, holy bananas, Batman." What do you mean? These bananas, they're full of holes, parasites, worms, probably. We could have got better bananas if we had those tariffs in place. I'm just saying. Yeah. Gil hit it on the head. They're like, did you guys see what he did? He was making fun of the retardation people. He was saying that if you were mentally challenged, that he hates your guts and he loves the devil. Well, he didn't say anything about the devil. That's weird. Did you see him wearing Leviathan?
He said it with his hands. He was casting spells.
It was casting spells. It was many moons ago. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's absolutely right. There's, yep. Oh, yep. I think they should make them two a tag team, like wrestling. They come out and they just do, like, I could do a whole skit on that, but we're not going to do it right now. So what she said, what Lyric told me, she goes, I was out for my morning jog. This is what I did all the time. This was like my routine. I'd been doing it for years. It was like Groundhog Day. Raising children. 2 kids. She's like, and I'm jogging down this residential area, and then I go to this one area that's kind of like where it's just kind of an open field, and there's no houses. She's like, and reminding me, she's like, sometimes she's like, I start my jog at 5 o'clock sharp. It's like 4 something, right? Sometimes I go earlier. She's like, and this morning it was like 5:02. She's like, and I see a little girl just standing there in the open field. She's like, and I'm jogging and I look over and this little girl looks like she's probably, maybe 8, 9 years old. She says, I stop and I'm like, she's like, I couldn't in good conscience just keep jogging. There's a little child here and it's, and she's like, I'm kind of running in place. And she's like, where are your parents? And she's like, the little girl just kind of like, she's like, and I kid you not, she goes, I didn't see her little legs moving. I was looking at her eyes and she goes, and she just like, real quick. She was just like right there in front of me. And she says, can you help me? And she's like, well, yeah, where are your parents? She goes, and then I just decided this is more important than my morning jog. I stop. She's like, and, I'm like, are you okay? She's like, no, I need help. Can we go back to your house? She says, there's a street light. She goes, and so I said, come over here. And she goes, and for instinctively, she goes, I would have grabbed the little child's hand and kind of just took her. She had long black hair. She's like, and even though there was some wind and it was cold, she's like, the child's hair was not moving. She noticed that. She says, we get into the light and I turn around and I look at this child and she's like, and I'm like, holy. She used the bad word. Yeah, we don't, as Aggies, we don't use them bad words. No sir, we Bob, and no way, no how. It was very bad. Pastor Jack here says, you use those bad words, you go to that unmentionable place.
HE double hockey sticks.
Your ass goes to hell where you belong. Right? For using them bad words. So she's looking at this child, and this is what she told me. And she says, look, I'm looking at her. She's like, her eyes are big, like bigger than they should be, but not, to where it's just, but she's like, she has these big bulging eyes and they're black, solid black. She's like, and when I'm looking at her and I'm like, where are your parents? And she's like, I don't know. She's like, can you let me use your phone? And she's like, she goes, I lied. I'm like, I don't have a phone on me. And she's like, yes, you do. It's right there. And she's like, on my hip. And she's like, I had it right there in my hip. And I was like, yeah, but it doesn't. She's like, you know what? Let me see if I can get service. And this child is like, yes, you can get service. Don't lie. She's like, and all I wanted to do was get the hell away from this being. She's like, I'm telling you, she's like, it was not a child. She's like, I said, what do you think it was? She goes, I don't know what it was, but this was not a child. This was not a kid. So she backs up and she's like, there's nothing around. She's like, the feeling I got from this thing was like Predator. And get this. She told me something very creepy. I said, and I asked this question, Anthony, you know how I interview. And I told her, I said, what kind of predator? Predatory. She's like a spider. She's like, the image was like a spider crawling on me and just cocooning me and eating me. She said this little girl kept like scooting toward me and I couldn't see her feet, through her little dress. And she's like, okay. She goes, can you stop coming toward me? And she's like, why? Are you afraid? And she's like, no. She's like, no, I'm okay. And then this thing was like, why do you keep lying to me? Take me back to your house. Let me come inside and use the phone. She's like, I have a phone here. She's like, you know what? I'm going to call the police. And she says, I started kind of backing away. And this child kept going toward me. She's like, and then she's like, I noticed when this child would walk, when it would move, the feet were weird and crooked. And there was something dragging behind this child. And she's like, I didn't know what it was. I couldn't see it. It was kind of whipping around in the wind, but nothing else on the child was moving. The hair was like stuck in place. The eyes were big. She was saying that a normal person's eyes, she's like about twice that size.
Jeez.
Just black. And she says, she goes, I turned around and just took off running. She's like, and I looked back and this child, which what I thought was a child, was squatted down and was just crawling towards me with the arms kind of at its side, with the fingers pointed straight down to the ground. So whatever that thing was that was behind it was kind of like helping in its locomotion.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, and it followed me. She goes, I turned the corner and it went toward me. She's like, and then she's like, this thing must have cut through the open field. She goes, because I saw it pop out on the other side. At this point, she began to call it an it. Popped out. She's like, so I crossed the road. She goes, and then I ran again across another, and she goes, and I just took off running. She's like, and then there was this woman that was driving. She's like, and I recognized her. It was my friend's mother-in-law. She goes, and I waved her down. I was like, hey. And get this, her name is Angelica, like angel, right? Mm-hmm. And she goes, and I get into the vehicle with her. And I said, can you give me a ride to my house? She goes, I look back and I don't see it. She's like, but I didn't jog for about a month. She's like, I went to the gym. I said, what did you do? She goes, I went to the gym and I was on a treadmill. She's like, I learned to use the treadmill and enjoy it. So, yeah, I think I would probably be less inclined to be out running around. So that was her story. But before we go back to the other story. What did the angel, what did it say? It talked to Jay. And Jay had this to say to his friends. He said, this angel, the angel of the Lord, said that I had slain this beast to protect you. You all have a purpose. and that it was the will of God for us to all find our salvation. He's like, 2 of us had no salvation. That was Riley and Hector. At that point in time, he's like, Jay, he goes, he was already like a preacher. He's like, we knelt down and we all prayed. He goes, and I accepted Christ that night. So did Hector. He's like, and my life's never been the same. He's like, I fell in love with Pam. He's like, he made it a point, though, to say that she's actually not 10 years. She's only 9.5 years old. He's like, she's 9.5 years old to me. He's like, but I could never found a harder working or a better woman. He goes, and I love her. He's like, she taught me a lot about life. So he said, this is what he said. He said that the angel did what it did and that it was to protect their land, and it gave them advice on how to keep these things from coming up out of the ground and coming after them. But Jay said something else. He said that the answers will come when you sleep. And one night he wakes up and he calls, and Hector answered the phone. This is what Hector told me, because I talked to him and Adam together. And Hector said, he goes, I answered the phone. And Jay's like, you need to be really careful. He's like, because these things can turn humans who are not in Christ into monsters. He's like, and then he hangs up. He goes, so then I'm up, I'm like 4 a.m, and I'm like, what is going on? Why did he just call and tell me this? So he calls, not Adam, he calls Riley. And Riley, you know, he's 6 a.m. They're getting ready to go out and feed and all that. And he goes, what's going on, man? He goes, I just got a weird call from Jay. And he goes, really? Jay's in Utah at like this conference. He was doing this youth outreach thing at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got all these programs he does for people. And he goes, and he was, get this, he's converting Mormons. He was trying to convert Mormons to, you know, not be Mormon, I guess. Whatever they do, that's, don't judge, folks. I don't judge. You don't judge. So they call Jay, and Jay's like, yeah, what's going on? And he goes, it's right before lunchtime, and they were taking a break, and Jay goes, I didn't call you. And then Jay's like, gets this kind of pause, and then he goes, oh, I guess I did. Then later that night, it's about 10, 11 o'clock at night, Jay calls him and says, hey, are you guys together? And he says, yeah, we're together. We're working. And he's like, I thought I was dreaming. He goes, and I had this dream. And then Hector remembered, he goes, you remember you told us that the angel told you that wisdom, he said exact words were, wisdom will come to you while you sleep. So he might have been asleep still when he called and told him these things. That's a trippy, freaky thing in and of itself. And so I was just like thinking, man, that's crazy. I was like, you guys have had some real crazy stuff, but there's a lot of people who've had these crazy things. Just do a little bit of work, a little bit of sleuthing, and just go from one to the next. And, you know, this is how you do it. If you really want to get down to the brass tacks and get to the answers, get to the bottom of things, this is how we do it. Because one thing leads to another, right? Okay, so a lot of meat on the bone there. We still got a lot to talk about. Eventually, we'll get to it. I'm going to run. I'm going to jump on with Jason Bland on Talk Soup, Paranormal Soup.
Chicken soup for the paranormal soul.
Yeah, and BMR is on there, and I'll be on there for a little bit, and then I got to jump because I got things I got to do. But if you want to go check it out, see what they're talking about, it's always a good show if you got Bigfoot Michigan Rob on there, and he's with Jason Bland. So let's see what's going on.
I'm gonna post a link to the did that live stream in the comments and then pin it at the top. So if y'all want to join, you can click on that link and head over.
And tomorrow night, if you're a Patreon member, folks, join the Patreon. I'm telling you, it's worth it, man. It really is, because we're going to talk some Dogman. We're going to talk some whatever. We're going to have open lines like we always do. People can come on and say whatever they got to say. And join, okay? Join the Patreon, 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 tier. We sent out the mail lots. People are getting their stuff, and they're posting it in the PRT page and in the group, and it's really cool. I love it because people are showing us their stuff that they got. They're so happy. They're excited. The merchandise is off the chain, for real. So go and join, do that, and join us over at Paranormal Soup with Jason Bland. And also, don't forget, if you're a member now, we're going to do a giveaway. Everybody's jumping off here. If you're a member and your name is in green, if your name is not in green, get your name in green. Right now, if you haven't won, your name is in green, say I haven't won, and you'll be the winner. See Knopfsinger, this coming week, we will get it done. We had a cold spell, and it got down into teens and 20s for like an entire week, and it was nasty and just cold, and it was wet and everything. So we postponed our meeting with Seven Clay. But we will be getting that done this week, and yes, the hats will be a part of the catalog.
The same person was the same one to say that they haven't won, or it was the first one to say they haven't
Lawrence
won.
Colley says I haven't won. Philip Miller says I haven't won, and Gaynor Haynes said I haven't won. But C. Knopfsinger says I haven't won. So we got 4 people saying I haven't won. So I'll take the top 3. Knopfsinger, tell them what they got to do.
So if you won tonight, make sure you send an email to Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. That email address is joshturner at prtpodcast.com. In that email, just say your name on YouTube. Make sure you send your shirt size and your mailing address. That's all the information we need, and we'll get your stuff sent out.
And it's really easy to become a member, folks. Tell them how to become a member.
So if you want to become a member, I think it's a little bit different whether you're using an Android desktop computer or a what's the other one, iPhone. But usually, I'm gonna try and show you this on my phone. So you see the chat box down there, and there's a button right there. It's like a little $sign. You can click on that, and it'll give you the option to become a member. If you don't see that, usually if you go to the bottom of the video where it says subscribe, there's going to be a subscribe button, and then there's going to be a button that says join next to that. So you can click on that, and that should get you to the membership as well.
So Philip, you won. Philip Miller, Lawrence Cowley, and C. Knopfsinger. But you know what, Gaynor, you said it just right at the same time as Lawrence, Philip, and so I'm going to go ahead and let you win too. So 4 winners tonight, folks. We got 4. All right. So Gaynor, never fear, we're going to get you.
And every time we do one of these giveaways, the mods are always real quick to post the instructions in the live chat. So if we tell you and you don't remember something, just check the messages in the live chat. The mods are always on top of it. They'll let you know what to do.
Okay, and folks, I got to say, Elastic Machinery, one of our good friends and allies, and been with us for a long time. He said, I'd appreciate y'all's prayers. My house burned down yesterday morning. I got all my elderly family out. I lost everything, but who cares, man? Just prayers for my family, please. Send me a list of things you might need, and we'll send you a care package. Okay? We'll do what we can. I hope you had insurance, all I can tell you. Other than that, and we'll pray. Please pray for this man, folks. DN Ash says it doesn't for me. Hence why I'm not a member anymore. I can't be. I don't have the option.
You might need to try it on your desktop or laptop, like just on a computer if it's not working on your phone. Because I know that whether you have an Android or iPhone, it's different. And then depending on how old or new your phone is, it's going to be different. It just gets kind of confusing.
Philip Barnes says it works on Safari. Lolo says it's a YouTube issue. Okay, so guys, say prayers for Elastic Machinery. No, it sucks, man. I'm sorry that happened. Rita says praying for you and your family. Elastic, yes. Rita, very nice person. Alan Howe. People praying for you, JJ praying for you. Everybody that's praying, thank you for that. And thank you for everybody who donated. Thank you for those who are joining the memberships and the Patreon. Tomorrow's going to be awesome because I like doing the Patreon shows. Last week we had Slim Jimmy come on and Dick Richards, and we talked. We had a great time, and we're going to do it again. We're going to have another great time tomorrow, and I'm going to tell a couple of stories that'll eventually get around to being on the show. But you get to hear them first because you're on the Patreon. So don't forget, tomorrow night, Patreon. What time? 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
8 p.m. Patreon show. So thank you. We'll send the link. How do you do it? Tell them how you do it.
So for those of you who are Patreon members, whenever we get the live stream set up, we're going to make a post within Patreon that's just it's a link to get you to YouTube. That link is only accessible to you as a Patreon member. It's not going to show up on the, like, if you just go to the YouTube channel, it's not going to show up. You have to access it through Patreon because it's a Patreon only live stream. So yeah, so just be looking out for that post, whether you use the Patreon app or if you use it on the computer. If you go to the Patreon page, there's going to be a post with a link that you can click on to get you over to the live stream. But you have to use that link. You can't access it any other way.
Thank you for that, Rita. She's just sending her donations via PayPal. Rita, you've donated so much over the years. You don't got to do anything. You're great. You guys are good. And if you are a moderator, just ask and you shall receive. And we get what you get, what you want. So just tell me what you want, and I don't care if you live in another country, I'll send it to you on my dime. Okay? And become a Patreon member before tomorrow. So you can join and be at the show because it's going to be good. It's going to be great. It's going to be off the chain. Marlo says, what time for the Patreon? 8 o'clock p.m. Central. So join. Don't miss it. Once again, thank you to everybody who donated. I'm going to jump off here and go over to Jason Bland. All right. Paranormal Soup. I'll see you guys. Good night.